I'm Dawn, and I'm 40 years old. Looking back on a tough time in my life, it all started when I decided to end my marriage with Ben. I realized we weren't a good match because he acted like a child and annoyed me. The idea of staying with him forever felt like too much to bear. But it wasn't just Ben who made me unhappy. His mom, Carol, also made my life difficult. Right from the start, she made it clear she didn't think I was good enough for her son. Her constant criticism and mean comments made me feel bad about myself and like I didn't belong in my own marriage. I remember many times when Ben's immaturity and Carol's meddling caused problems for us. There were evenings after work when I hoped for a calm time at home, but Ben would be busy playing video games, ignoring me and our shared responsibilities. When I tried to talk to him about it, he just brushed me off, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing. Ben, I had a really long day at work. Could you please help out with the chores? Can it wait? I'm busy playing this game right now. But that wasn't even the worst part. There was a time when you forgot our anniversary. I can't believe you forgot our anniversary, Ben. It was a special day for us. Oh, come on, Dawn. It's just a date. We can celebrate it another time. Then he invited his mother over without even asking me first. Why did you invite your mother over without talking to me? I was hoping for a quiet weekend together. She's my mom, Dawn. She can visit whenever she wants. Don't be so stressed about it. And let me tell you about our money situation. It felt like I was married to a kid. Ben, can we talk about making some financial plans and saving for the future? You worry too much, Dawn. Let's just spend our money and deal with it later. These are just a few examples of how my marriage was falling apart. My concerns were ignored, my feelings didn't matter, and my needs were forgotten. It became clear that Ben's childishness and lack of caring were big problems in our relationship. Then there were the family get-togethers where Carol would always find a way to insult me in front of everyone. Her mean comments about my looks, job, and even my cooking really hurt. She seemed to enjoy making me uncomfortable while Ben usually pretended not to notice, too scared to stand up to his mom. Let me give you a few real examples of how she, just like her son, put me down and made me feel small. Example 1. Carol, I spent a long time cooking this meal for everyone. I hope you like it. Well, let's see if it's even good. I'm not sure I trust your cooking. Example 2. Carol, I found this dress for the event. I think it would look nice on me. Oh honey, that dress is too revealing for someone your age. You want to look silly to you? Example 3. Carol, please don't criticize how I raise my kids. I know what's best for them. Well, clearly you don't, or you wouldn't make such silly decisions. What's wrong with you? Example 4. Carol, I've been working hard to stay healthy. I'd like your support. Oh please? All that exercise and dieting won't make a difference. You'll never look as good as me. Example 5. Carol, I'd asked you nicely before. Please stop saying mean things about me to other people. I'm just being honest, dear. People should know what you're really like. These conversations show how Carol always put me down and said hurtful things throughout my marriage. Her actions caused a lot of stress and made it hard to find any happiness with Ben. I reached a point where I knew I deserved better than this toxic situation. I made the tough choice to file for divorce, wanting to break free from the constant emotional pain I'd endured for too long. The courtroom became a place where I had to explain to the judge why I wanted to end the marriage, talking about how it had hurt me. When the legal process was over, I felt a bit lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But then something unexpected happened. My ex-mother-in-law, Carol, couldn't hide her happiness. She stood up in court looking thrilled, and said she'd finally gotten rid of me and won her son back. I've won. I finally won. Hearing her say that made me furious. How could she be happy about my pain and the end of my marriage? I couldn't hold back my anger. I told her exactly what I thought of her, calling her out for being a mean and spiteful person. But instead of being affected by what I said, Carol just laughed. Her laughter filled the courtroom, making the end of that painful chapter in my life even harder to bear. It was a scary reminder that some people feel like they win by hurting others, and her joy only made me more determined to move past the toxic situation I'd been in. Leaving the courtroom behind, I decided to take back control of my life and find the happiness I deserved. Carol's laughter reminded me of the battles I fought and the strength I'd found in myself. I wouldn't let others' judgments or cruelty define me anymore. I was determined to rise above the negativity and embrace the freedom waiting for me. With every step forward, I started a journey of healing and self-discovery. The path ahead wasn't easy, but I faced it with determination. I knew finding happiness wouldn't be easy, but I'd grown stronger from the struggles I'd faced. It was time to leave behind the drama and pain and look forward to a future full of hope and self-love. But unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. It seems like trouble just keeps finding me. Remember when Carol was gloating about winning? Well, she thought she'd get something out of it, but she never did, and she never will. You see, she believed she'd finally get her hands on a prized family heirloom she'd envy for years. What she didn't know was that I held the key to her dreams. It was a stunning diamond orchid necklace, passed down through generations in my family. Its beauty and rarity made it incredibly valuable, worth millions of dollars. Carol's eyes always lit up with greed whenever she saw it, but she could never have it. Throughout my marriage to Ben, Carol would often suggest selling the necklace for practical reasons, but I always refused, explaining its sentimental value and importance to my family. Even after the divorce, Carol still thought she deserved half of its worth. She believed she was entitled to it, thinking it would fulfill her materialistic desires. But what she didn't know was that I had a plan. It had been a month since the divorce, and I thought I'd left Carol and her schemes behind. Then, one evening, I was surprised when I heard a familiar knock on my door. Opening it, I saw Carol standing there, crying and shaking. "Dawn, please, can we talk?" Feeling curious and a bit sorry for her, I let her in to get away from the cold. I wondered why she was so upset and why she'd come to see me. We sat down in the living room, and I asked her to tell me what was wrong. Through her tears, Carol managed to speak, her voice trembling. "My plan, it's all gone wrong, Dawn," Carol said between sobs. "I thought I'd get what I wanted, but it's turned into a disaster." I felt skeptical but curious about what she was talking about. "What plan, Carol? And why are you so upset?" Carol took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. "You see, I thought Ben would get half of the value of the heirloom, and I would finally get what I wanted. But he told me something that changed everything." I leaned in, eager to hear what she had to say. "What did Ben tell you, Carol? Please tell me." Carol wiped away her tears, her voice sounding regretful and surprised. Ben told me he'd forgotten to mention a prenuptial agreement he signed before we got married. It said the heirloom and all your money were protected. I never had a chance." I couldn't help but laugh, feeling a mix of relief and triumph. "Oh, Carol, I've been waiting for this moment. I always knew your schemes would backfire." Carol's face turned red with embarrassment and anger. "You knew the whole time, and you let me think I had won. How could you do that?" Leaning back in my chair, feeling triumphant, I smiled at Carol. "Oh, Carol, I didn't make you believe anything. You just saw what you wanted to see because you were so focused on what you wanted. I knew the truth would come out eventually, and it did." As Carol faced the reality of her actions, her tears turned into frustration and regret. She had gambled and lost, leaving her with nothing but defeat. "I can't believe you had a prenup, Dawn. I was hoping to get some of your money after the divorce." "Carol, this isn't about being a good wife. It's about protecting myself and what's mine from people like you. I was smart enough to look out for my future. Don't be upset, Carol. You're the one who tried to trick and manipulate others for your own gain." Reluctantly, Carol pulled herself together, glaring at me with a mix of anger and resignation. "Heartless. You dare to call me heartless, Carol? Look at how you treated me during my marriage to Ben. You were mean, cruel, and always trying to control everything." As Carol stormed out, the room fell silent. The weight of her failed plans hit her hard. It was clear that her greed and deceit had led to her downfall, leaving her with nothing. I stayed strong, knowing I had to stand up for myself and what was mine. I had learned that trust and love shouldn't blind me to betrayal. As Carol reluctantly composed herself, she shot me a glare filled with anger and resignation. The bitterness of her own decisions hung heavy in the air as she muttered one word: "Heartless." I couldn't let that slide. "You call me heartless? Carol? Look at how you treated me during my marriage to Ben. You were mean, cruel, and always trying to control everything." "I never treated you badly," Dawn firmly asserted. "You're exaggerating, Dawn." "Oh, really? Let me remind you of the time you purposefully excluded me from family events, constantly belittled my achievements, and spread rumors about me behind my back. You enjoyed seeing me suffer," Carol retorted, frustration evident in her voice. "I did no such thing. You're just trying to paint me as the villain. Stop denying it, Carol. I've had enough of your lies and manipulation. Get out of my house, please, Dawn demanded, her patience wearing thin. Dawn, please, just give me some money. I really need it, Carol pleaded desperately. I'll give you 30 seconds to get off my property, or I'll call the police. This is your last chance, Dawn warned seriously. You can't treat me like this, Dawn. We're family. Families should be kind to each other, Carol argued angrily. Goodbye, Carol, Dawn said firmly as Carol left, looking upset and defeated. As the seconds passed, Carol's face showed a mix of anger, shock, and feeling like she lost. She realized she couldn't control Dawn like she wanted to. Reluctantly, she walked towards the door. The tension between them filled the air. Carol gave one last look before leaving, stepping into an uncertain future and facing the consequences of her actions. I stood tall, feeling both relieved and free. I had cut off ties with something toxic and took back control of my life. The next day rolled in, and yet another person from my past tried to make amends. What do you want, Ben? I asked, my voice cold and unwelcoming. Dawn, I need your help. I'm in a tough spot right now. And I thought maybe. Ben's voice trailed off, sounding desperate. Forget it, Ben. I don't want to hear your excuses. You had the nerve to call me instead of facing me in person. How cowardly can you get? I interrupted, my patience running out. I thought this approach would be better, Dawn. Please just listen to me, Ben pleaded, his voice trembling. All right, Ben. Go ahead. Explain to me how you always put down my goals, laughed at my dreams, and made me feel inadequate. Do you recall those instances? I confronted him. I'm not sure what you mean, Dawn. We had our differences, but Ben started, but I interrupted him. Disagreements? Is that what you call it? I call it emotional abuse. You constantly underestimated me, trying to crush my spirit, but I'm done with it. I deserve better, I declared firmly. Please, I'm sorry for everything. I'm in a tough spot right now, and I thought maybe you could help me out. Ben's voice trailed off once more, his desperation evident. It's ironic, Ben. You agreed to the prenup, yet now you're here begging and pleading. I didn't fully understand what I was signing. I just knew I loved you. Stop pretending, Ben. You probably expected me to change my mind, I remarked sharply, my tone cutting through the air. Dawn, please just listen to me, Ben pleaded once more. I'm saying this for the last time. If you ever attempt to reach out to me again, I'll take legal action and get a restraining order against you. Clear? I warned him sternly. But Dawn. Ben tried to protest, but I cut him off. No, Ben, it's finished. Goodbye, I stated firmly, ending the call and removing his number from my contacts. I was finally free from both of them, and I felt relieved. As I sat and pondered on the journey I'd been through since my turbulent marriage ended, a feeling of contentment enveloped me. I was in a much better place now, both mentally and emotionally. It felt like a heavy burden had been lifted, allowing me to breathe freely once more. Life had taken an unexpected turn, and I found myself enjoying the simple pleasures it offered. I embraced my newfound freedom and delved back into the dating scene, meeting new people and relishing the excitement of forming romantic connections. Throughout this journey, I learned to value myself and refused to settle for anything less than the love and respect I deserved. Alongside the thrill of new relationships, I discovered strength and empowerment in sharing my story with others. The struggles I faced during my marriage inspired me to write a memoir, documenting the challenges I overcame. It became a symbol of my inner strength and offered hope to others who had faced similar hardships. Meanwhile, I couldn't ignore the bitterness of my ex-husband and mother-in-law. They seemed envious as they watched my success and happiness grow. They had underestimated my resilience, and now they faced the consequences of their actions. It was a satisfying reversal of fortune. Though I had moved away from their toxic influence, they still tried to damage my reputation, but I was determined to rise above their negativity and continue thriving. Despite Carol and Ben's futile attempts to tarnish my reputation, I refused to be silenced or underestimated. I remained steadfast in protecting my integrity and had taken legal action against them for their slanderous words. Their efforts to provoke me only fueled my determination to hold them accountable for their actions. As I faced this new chapter, I felt grateful for the inner strength I had found and the support of my friends and loved ones who stood by me. Surrounded by a network of uplifting individuals, I felt inspired to keep reaching for my goals. Their unwavering encouragement reminded me that I was capable of overcoming any obstacle. From the ruins of my failed marriage, I rose stronger and wiser than ever. I learned to value myself, set boundaries, and pursue my happiness without apology. The journey was tough, but it led me to self-empowerment and a life that was truly mine. My story wasn't just about pain and struggle, it was about resilience and triumph. I conquered the shadows of my past and stepped into a future full of promise. With each new chapter I wrote, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, embracing the joy that had been missing for too long. With every stroke of my pen, I reclaimed my voice, my strength, and my freedom. My goal wasn't to drag them down, but to rise above, showcasing the resilience and dignity within me. I was Dawn, the phoenix who emerged from the ashes, and I was prepared to soar higher than ever before, leaving my past behind me.
"Please leave. It's too crowded in here," Jennifer said with a laugh. Her smile was smug and unsettling, the worst I had ever seen. I stood there, shocked, as Jennifer repeated herself. I didn't understand why I had to leave my own house. "This is my house, you know. What are you talking about?" I asked. "I know this house is in Daniel's name," she replied. I was shocked by Jennifer's nerve. Even though I had explained everything when we got married, it seemed she hadn't listened at all. "Fine, I'll leave," I said with a sigh. Watching Jennifer gleefully unpack her furniture into Daniel's home, I wished he were here, but he was away on a business trip for a month. I decided to wait until he returned to discuss the situation. "Well then, take care," I said. With that, I left the house filled with memories. I knew where I was going next. I anticipated Daniel's reaction when he returned. "My name is Karen, and I'm a 65-year-old housewife. I worked until I was 60 and now live comfortably thanks to my pension and the inheritance from my husband, who passed away 5 years ago. He came from a wealthy family and owned several properties. Despite his wealth, he enjoyed working and was frugal. During the years we raised our child, there were times I got frustrated with my husband for being so focused on work, but I always admired him for taking on challenges with a smile. It's been 5 years since he passed away in October, in a tragic accident that happened on our wedding anniversary. I can't forget seeing the crushed cake box at the accident scene. He left behind a significant inheritance, insurance money, and our beloved son Daniel. Daniel turned 40 this year and works at a big company. After his father's sudden death, Daniel went through a rough patch. He was cheated on and divorced by his then-wife, and he briefly sought counseling to cope. I worried he might quit his job, but then he met Jennifer, and things turned around quickly once they started dating. They got married last year, and since then he's been even more driven at work and seems to have fully recovered. Jennifer, my son's wife, is a single mother with 2 boys aged 2 and 5. Daniel, who adores kids, had grown close to them, and I found them incredibly cute. Daniel couldn't have children due to an illness in his childhood, so the idea of having grandchildren filled me with joy. I thought Jennifer was quite generous, although she occasionally said things that surprised me. Overall, I believe she had a good heart. Daniel and everyone else seemed to agree. It never occurred to me that things could turn out the way they did. After their marriage, Daniel and Jennifer moved into a property near our house. I had suggested they live in one of my husband's houses. "We want to start in a home we've chosen ourselves," Daniel insisted. He explained that Jennifer had a preference for cute things, and none of the available properties matched her tastes. When I first heard this, I was puzzled, but since they were newly married with children, I decided not to dwell on it, thinking they deserved to enjoy their preferred lifestyle. Daniel was often busy with work and traveled frequently. During his absences, Jennifer would bring the kids over for dinner. The grandchildren were well behaved, but Jennifer's behavior was quite different. She helped herself to food and often went through our closets without asking, even entering our bedroom to take my jewelry. This shocked me, and I felt the need to confront her about it. Jennifer suddenly burst into tears. "I just wanted us to get along. Please don't hate me." Faced with Jennifer's tears, I found myself comforting her instead of addressing the issue. I chose not to tell Daniel about what happened, and since Jennifer didn't take anything else after that, I decided to keep the incident to myself. About 6 months into their marriage, Jennifer started sending her kids over to stay with us frequently. She would call abruptly the day before and hang up quickly, making it hard to say no. Reluctantly, I found myself taking care of the kids each time. Although they remained obedient, their table manners had noticeably deteriorated since we first met. They ate loudly and often spilled food outside their plates, despite being well-behaved before. I had to remind them repeatedly, but they would only listen temporarily before slipping back into their old habits during the next visit. This routine left me feeling frustrated. Jennifer appeared unconcerned and would drop off her children at our home and leave quickly. Initially, Jennifer would visit with the kids, but after a few times, she started sending them over alone. Jennifer, it's okay for the kids to come over, but I'd appreciate it if you could join them sometimes, I suggested. But I'm quite busy, Jennifer replied evasively. That night, Daniel called me unexpectedly. Hey Mom, could you try to be a bit more understanding with Jennifer? What do you mean? I asked, confused. I thought I had been quite kind to her, but Daniel seemed to have a different perspective. Jennifer feels pressured to visit often because she's afraid of being expected to help out like she had to in her previous marriage. She had a tough time with her ex-husband's family, so please go easy on her. Really? Okay, I understand. It seemed Jennifer had misunderstood my intentions. I responded to Daniel with mixed feelings, and the next day, Jennifer sent the kids over to our house again. As their first year of marriage passed, the children began spending half of each week with us. Meanwhile, Jennifer would only visit a few times a month, staying for about 10 minutes each time. I started feeling uneasy about Jennifer, who always seemed too busy to talk. When I asked the children about Jennifer's plans, they would look guilty and shake their heads. Initially, I tried asking a few times, but their reactions made me feel so guilty that I couldn't bring myself to pry further. Then one day, Jennifer unexpectedly came over with Daniel. We sat down for coffee and had a pleasant chat after a long while. That's when Daniel spoke up. I have something to discuss, he said seriously. The kids have really bonded with you, and I'm away on business trips often, so I can't spend much time with them. If you're okay with it, I'd like you to move in and help Jennifer out. What do you think? Move in? Well, what about Jennifer? I was taken aback by the sudden suggestion of living together, nearly dropping my coffee cup in surprise. However, I kept my composure and turned to Jennifer. Karen has always been a tremendous help, and I'd really appreciate her assistance, Jennifer chimed in. Is that so? Well, I'll need some time to think about it, I replied. Daniel seemed pleased with my response. Knowing him, he must be concerned about my well-being too. I pondered over the proposal for a couple of days and eventually decided to accept. From there, we began clearing out unnecessary items and preparing rooms for Daniel's family and the children. With the kids' help, we finished cleaning up sooner than expected, although the effort left me with daily muscle pain. A stark reminder of my age. Despite the challenges, I successfully cleared out 2 rooms. As I busily cleaned, Jennifer didn't offer to help at all, which made me increasingly uneasy about living with her. Then came moving day. As the movers brought in boxes, Jennifer pulled me aside into the garden. With a puzzled expression, I turned to her, only to be met with a malicious smile. Then, unbelievably, she said something that left me stunned. Please leave. It's too cramped in here, Jennifer laughed, her smile both smug and unsettling. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why was she asking me to leave when it was my house? I was bewildered. This is my house, you know. What are you talking about? I asked. I know this house is in Daniel's name, she replied sharply. Jennifer's assertion left me feeling inwardly frustrated. Despite explaining everything when we got married, it seemed she hadn't paid attention at all. All right then, I'll leave, I said with a sigh. I watched as furniture that reflected Jennifer's tastes was moved in, and she seemed overjoyed. It would have been better if Daniel had been there, but he was away on a business trip. He wouldn't be back for a month, so I decided to postpone any discussion until then. Well then, take care, I said as I left the house filled with memories. I already knew where I was headed next. I eagerly anticipated Daniel's reaction upon his return. Without delay, I moved my belongings into my new home. The new home was a villa my husband and I had visited once, filled with memories, including where he proposed to me. While it didn't hold as many memories as our previous home, it held a special place in my heart, as we had planned to spend our second life here together. After finishing unpacking, I relaxed alone on the sofa. The place was very comfortable, thanks to the caretaker's diligent maintenance. I felt a pang of sadness for not seeing the children anymore, but I was prepared to sever ties depending on Daniel's response. A month passed quickly, and around the time Daniel's business trip ended, he called me. I picked up the phone, feeling a bit nervous. Mom, where are you? There's no space for you here, and we were supposed to be living together. What's going on? Hasn't Jennifer said anything to you? When I got back, Mom wasn't here, and Jennifer just cries without giving me any answers. Well then, come to this address I'm about to give you, I replied. I gave Daniel the address and hung up. The next day, Daniel arrived at my new home with Jennifer and the children. When I opened the door, I saw Daniel looking a bit somber and Jennifer appearing pale. Welcome, is something wrong? I asked, concerned. No, nothing, Jennifer replied, visibly tense, while the children looked around with curiosity, especially the 5-year-old who seemed particularly fascinated. I guided Daniel's family into the living room. As they took in the fully furnished space, Daniel seemed to realize that I had no intention of continuing our previous living arrangement. "Hey Mom, why did you suddenly decide not to live together?" Daniel asked, puzzled. "Well, Jennifer should have a good understanding of that, shouldn't she?" I replied. Daniel scratched his head with a slightly irritated expression before recounting what he had heard from Jennifer. "Jennifer mentioned that you didn't like her choice of furniture, right? But that was just for our room. Couldn't you have let it go? She also said she had to buy more furniture for the living room because you moved out." "Oh, so she added more furniture, did she?" I looked directly at Jennifer, who twitched nervously. Her lips curved slightly upwards, as if she believed Daniel wouldn't believe my side of the story without proof. "Jennifer, why lie?" I asked plainly. "I haven't lied about anything," Jennifer replied, tears welling up in her eyes. Daniel immediately stepped in to console her, seeming to view me as the source of the conflict. Meanwhile, the grandchildren hung their heads behind them, avoiding eye contact with Jennifer. I let out a frustrated sigh. "Jennifer, stop the fake crying. The children can see right through it." "That's awful, Daniel. I'm really not lying. Please believe me," Jennifer pleaded, clinging to Daniel and burying her face against him. Despite her words, her voice lacked genuine emotion. I felt annoyed with Daniel for siding with Jennifer in this situation. "Mom, Jennifer may have made mistakes, but leaving without discussing it isn't right. Can't we try to work things out?" Daniel pleaded. "Well, I do owe you an apology for leaving abruptly, but any reconciliation with Jennifer will have to wait until you hear this," I replied, tapping my mobile phone. Immediately, a voice played out loud, causing Jennifer's face to turn pale. "You recorded it?" I accidentally hit the video button while trying to capture the kids playing. The recording continued without my realizing. The voice from my phone sounded unlike Jennifer's usual tone, and Daniel looked bewildered, shifting his gaze between my phone and Jennifer. "Jennifer was the one who asked me to leave. I was just following her instructions," I clarified. "Is this really you, Jennifer?" "It can't be," Daniel demanded, pushing away from Jennifer, who clung to him, and asked her directly. However, Jennifer remained silent, staring at the ground. Daniel's frustration grew as he raised his voice, demanding answers from Jennifer. "It's not true. Are you taking Karen's side?" Jennifer managed to protest weakly, but the recorded voice clearly called out the children's names, leaving no room for doubt. Despite Daniel's persistence and Jennifer's attempts to dodge the truth, the situation became wearisome. Finally, Jennifer slipped up in exasperation. "I never wanted to live with someone else in the first place." "What? You were the one who wanted Mom to live with us," Daniel said, clearly shocked by this revelation. Jennifer defiantly explained her reasoning. "Exactly. I couldn't understand why Karen was living in a house under your name while we had to rent. I wanted a home of our own." It appeared Jennifer was worried about being judged for living in a rental property after marrying again. Daniel had leased a luxurious condominium in the area, which cost around $4,000 per month. Despite this, Jennifer seemed to look down on it simply because it was a rental. This attitude caused me a different kind of frustration. Jennifer glared defiantly at me. "And now Karen is harassing me. This is the house I've always dreamed of. Why are you living here?" Daniel looked perplexed by Jennifer's accusation. Unlike Daniel, I straightforwardly explained to Jennifer, who was clearly on edge. "Why?" "Because this property originally belonged to my husband." "That's a lie because this place is," Jennifer started, possibly thinking of the caretaker or something else she was mistaken about. I showed Jennifer a photo on my mobile phone. Upon seeing the person in the photo, Jennifer exclaimed, "Father?" My husband had passed away before Daniel remarried, so Jennifer had never met him. She had never referred to my husband as father. Therefore, the father Jennifer mentioned must be the children's paternal grandfather. The photo captured Jennifer's father-in-law and me shaking hands. It was taken as a memento when we moved in. Jennifer looked at me, her face turning pale. "How do you know him?" "How? Because he's the caretaker here, of course," I replied calmly. Upon hearing this revelation, Jennifer sat down right where she stood. Daniel also appeared stunned, struggling to grasp the situation. Sensing the opportunity to clarify things further, I decided to continue. "We had a conversation when we moved in. That's when I learned he's your ex-husband's father, and also the real reason behind your divorce." "The real reason for the divorce?" Daniel's voice echoed in surprise. Jennifer, no longer trying to pretend, became visibly flustered by my words. "Karen, there must be some misunderstanding. I'm sorry, let's go home together." "Mom, please tell me," Daniel interrupted Jennifer, his expression earnest as he looked at me for answers. It would have been less damaging for Jennifer if this had come to light later, but I had no intention of showing mercy. I instructed the grandchildren to go play in the garden. They glanced at Jennifer but obeyed my request and headed outside. Once the children were fully engaged in their play, I turned back to Jennifer. I heard from Jennifer that her divorce was due to her husband's infidelity, but in reality, it was Jennifer who had an affair. Daniel was visibly shocked, and Jennifer trembled, avoiding my gaze. I can't believe this. Karen, why would you lie about this? Daniel asked, clearly shaken by the revelations. Oh, I also have a copy of the notarized document here. I retrieved the document from a drawer and handed it to Daniel. Daniel's face went pale as he scanned through the document. What's all this? Compensation? Custody to be revisited once the child can choose? Meeting before remarrying? I was never told about any of this. That's right. The other family also claimed they weren't informed about the remarriage, I added. Jennifer stared down, her face drained of color. Daniel sighed heavily and turned to Jennifer, his expression now devoid of his earlier kindness. Remember when I got divorced because I was cheated on? What did you say then? That the one who cheats is entirely at fault, right? Unforgivable, right? Yeah, Jennifer muttered quietly. Daniel's voice grew heated in response to Jennifer's silence. So the story about divorcing to escape from your husband's infidelity and extreme control, putting the kids at risk, was also a lie. What's that about? Jennifer appeared unsure how to answer. Daniel's frustration intensified. And didn't you say, I would never cheat? Daniel pressed on, his voice sharp with anger. I had to say that or you wouldn't have dated me, Jennifer finally replied, her voice tinged with desperation. Right, of course, Daniel retorted sharply, not letting Jennifer finish. Daniel was visibly agitated, his breathing heavy with emotion. Jennifer, on the other hand, began to sulk defiantly. I've heard you've been declining visits since you started dating Daniel and apparently leaving all the housework and childcare to his family. And now you're trying to blame me after remarrying. Why are you making unnecessary accusations? Jennifer shouted at me, her voice loud and defensive. Daniel gave Jennifer a cold, distant look. Her unguarded outburst had shattered the image she had maintained. It's over between us. Let's get a divorce, Daniel stated firmly. No, I don't want a divorce, Jennifer pleaded, clinging to Daniel, who tried to shake her off impatiently. Despite his attempts, Jennifer persisted. Just as Daniel's frustration seemed ready to boil over, an unexpected voice intervened. Mom, you're saying the same things you told Dad. You've got a new boyfriend now, so stop bothering Daniel. Michael, Jennifer's eldest son, spoke with a surprising maturity for his young age. His sudden return from the garden surprised not just me, but everyone present. What? Why are you saying unnecessary things, Michael? Jennifer snapped, clearly caught off guard by her son's unexpected words. What do you mean by a new boyfriend? Daniel asked, squatting down to look at Michael, clearly perplexed. Michael spoke again, maintaining his composure. Whenever you're away, Mom tells me to go to Grandma's house, and then her boyfriend comes to pick me up. Michael, don't lie, Jennifer interjected quickly. Daniel hugged Michael tightly and turned a stern gaze towards Jennifer, who looked taken aback by his genuine anger. We'll talk about this later, including the boyfriend and the compensation, with him present. It's not like that. I love you. It was just a brief fling with that guy, Jennifer pleaded desperately. That guy, huh? Daniel remarked coldly, his disappointment evident. Jennifer looked crestfallen at Daniel's remark. With a resolute expression, Daniel stood up, shielding Michael, and stared coldly at Jennifer. Without hesitation, he forcefully escorted her out of the house. Wait, Daniel. Open the door. The next time we talk will be with a lawyer present. I'll arrange for the kids to see their father. I've already called my parents. They're on their way to pick them up. What do my parents have to do with this? Jennifer continued knocking on the door for a while, but soon the noise ceased. Shortly after, I heard voices arguing and then the doorbell rang. Jennifer's parents stood there, looking apologetic. After entrusting the grandchildren to me, they took Jennifer back with them. Later, the grandchildren were safely introduced to Jennifer's ex-husband's family. It turned out that Jennifer had changed her phone number and moved without informing anyone since she started dating Daniel, making it impossible to reach her. Her ex-husband and his parents were overcome with emotion and embraced the children as soon as they saw them. Although Daniel had already legally adopted the children, transferring custody back to Jennifer's ex-husband took some time due to the legal process. It seems Jennifer's life has taken a sharp turn after the consequences of her actions. Her strict reprimand from her parents and her current work situation at a family-run hotel indicate a stark change in her circumstances. With high alimony payments to both Daniel and her ex-husband, she reportedly has little respite from her duties. I can't stand it anymore. I want to quit, she frequently complains, but her relatives are keeping a tight rein on her. Meanwhile, Daniel, having experienced his second divorce, has sworn off marriage and thrown himself into his work. Despite the lingering shock, I recently learned he's reconnected with a childhood friend who lives nearby and is 10 years his junior. They'd occasionally go out for meals together, and this friend even visited me recently to say hello. It turns out she's harbored feelings for Daniel since they were kids and never pursued other relationships because of her enduring affection for him. As a parent, it warms my heart to see that the young girl who once dreamed of marrying Daniel still holds those feelings into adulthood. Daniel himself seems somewhat pleased by this newfound connection. Living in a house where I was proposed to holds immense significance for me. Despite the alterations Jennifer made, the house has been completely renovated and now serves as a rental property. Living here alone, I never feel lonely. It's as if my husband's presence is still nearby. I cherish each day, anticipating the second phase of my life where I'll gather stories to share with him when we're reunited. My name is Lisa, and I'm 37 years old. I live with my husband Larry. We both work for the company that Larry's dad started. Even though Larry's dad has retired, he turned a small construction business into a company that makes $300 billion a year. He bought other construction companies, and even though he could be tough, everyone respects his business skills. Larry was groomed to take over after his dad. He grew up in a privileged way and is very kind-hearted. I worry that he might struggle in the competitive business world because he can be hesitant and unsure. Larry himself admits, "I don't think I'm cut out to lead. I might just end up as a figurehead if I try." He doesn't seem eager to take charge of the company. We've been married for 10 years and lately I'm frustrated with Larry's lack of drive. Unlike him, I see myself as someone who makes decisions easily. During his active years, my father-in-law appreciated this about me and gave me important tasks to handle. Before I married Larry, I worked at a bank, so I'm used to handling finances and always thinking about numbers. After we got married, I quit my job at the bank and planned to focus on being a full-time homemaker. But then my father-in-law asked me to work for his construction company instead. Soon after I started, he began inviting me to join board meetings and asked for my input on how things were managed. Initially, some board members were unsure about having the founder's daughter-in-law involved in important meetings. However, as I consistently offered valuable insights, they started to take my suggestions seriously. Despite Larry also being on the board, he rarely attended meetings and everyone, including my father-in-law, saw this as normal. One day when I returned from a meeting, I found Larry casually watching TV. "Why didn't you come to today's meeting?" I asked, feeling angry. "You're an important member, you should take it seriously." He didn't seem guilty at all when he replied, "Even if I did go, I don't really understand what they discuss. Besides, everyone prefers your input, so it's not a problem, right?" I couldn't help but wonder if he was upset about me being involved in the meetings, despite his nonchalant remarks. My father-in-law has been teaching me all the ins and outs of running the business and seems to be preparing me to take over. I started to enjoy being part of the management, and soon enough, I was working hard to meet my father-in-law's expectations. About 3 years after I started attending meetings, my father-in-law retired completely. When important decisions needed to be made, the board members would come to me for advice, sidelining Larry. I had hoped that this would motivate Larry to get more involved, but instead he became even more disconnected from his work. Despite coming to the office in the morning, Larry would vanish by noon and spend the rest of the day at home. When he saw me there, he avoided talking about work altogether, seeming uninterested in the company's affairs. Meanwhile, my responsibilities at the company kept growing. After my father-in-law retired, the board members relied on me increasingly, and I started handling duties similar to those of a CEO. Our company is large with many employees, so I worked hard to boost sales and profits for their sake. Thanks to the efforts of our employees, our sales started to rise. I found running the company more and more intriguing, and I became deeply involved in my work. In contrast, Larry seemed to lose interest in his job, and his presence at the company became less frequent. Our conversations at home dwindled, and our relationship started to feel strained. "I met your sister Nancy today, and we had lunch together," Larry told me when he came home. Nancy, who's 3 years older than me, just went through a divorce about 4 months ago. It happened because she cheated, and things got really heated when her angry husband showed up at our parents' house. I was caught up with work, so Larry stepped in to calm down Nancy's husband. Despite the tense situation, Larry's gentle nature and calm personality managed to persuade him to leave peacefully. Nancy later told me, "Your husband is really something. He handled my furious husband so effortlessly." She was impressed by Larry's ability to diffuse the situation. Nancy was able to finalize her divorce after paying alimony. Since then, she seemed to see Larry in a new light. Before, she might have viewed him as a wealthy, sheltered son who wasn't particularly remarkable. But after seeing how he handled her husband's anger, she began to see him as a capable and respectable business owner. Nancy, who was now single after her divorce, might have seen Larry as a desirable catch because she always liked wealthy men. But I was so focused on my work that I couldn't even imagine such a thing. Little did Nancy know, Larry was just a figurehead at the company and didn't actually run it. Nancy's ex-husband had been an impressive employee at a foreign company. He had boasted to me at their wedding, saying, "I have a high salary and good looks. You must be jealous. He was indeed handsome, intelligent, and carried a sophisticated charm. I couldn't fathom why Nancy would cheat on such a wonderful husband. 5 months after Larry mentioned having lunch with Nancy, I came home one day to find Larry looking unusually serious. "Lisa, we need to talk," he said. It was the first time he had spoken to me like that, and I felt a sinking feeling in my chest as I waited for him to continue. "Actually, Nancy is pregnant with my child, and I want a divorce," he told me. I was shocked by both the request for a divorce and the news of Nancy's pregnancy. Stunned and speechless, I listened as Larry added, "Nancy plans to come over on our next date off to discuss this. I hope I can count on your support." I was shocked. "So you want to marry my sister?" I asked Larry. He looked troubled and replied, "It's not that I want to marry her, but if she's pregnant with my baby, I feel like I have no choice." Larry's usual indecisiveness frustrated me, and I sighed. "Well, if she's carrying your child, I guess we have to deal with it. Let's talk more when she comes over." Feeling like Larry and I couldn't make decisions together, I decided to meet with my sister directly to sort things out. Even though I had already made up my mind about getting a divorce, I felt I needed to talk to my father-in-law about the situation with the company. As someone involved in running the business as the founder's daughter-in-law, divorcing would make me feel like an outsider. The next day, I went to my in-law's house and shared exactly what Larry had told me with my father-in-law. My mother-in-law was initially excited about the prospect of having a grandchild, but she quieted down quickly when my father-in-law gave her a stern look. It seemed she cared more about the grandchild than the company's management. After thinking it over, my father-in-law smiled and said, "Lisa, I want you to continue managing the company as you have been. Larry can do as he pleases. I'll handle the responsibility." It was clear that my father-in-law valued the company's management more than anything else, including his son or the prospect of a grandchild. Even though he had retired as the company's founder with the majority of shares, his influence was significant. There were no executives who would defy his wishes. I had grown attached to my work and was reluctant to step away from it. With my job secured, it was time to discuss the future with my sister. On my day off, she arrived at my house with a confident smile and said, "Lisa, it's a shame you couldn't have a child." She then arrogantly offered me money as compensation and demanded that I leave the house immediately. My husband sat there silently, listening to our conversation despite being the cause of the problem. I was dismayed by his indifferent demeanor and responded, "It's fine to discuss divorce, but we also need to address custody and property division. Let's bring in a lawyer to handle this properly." "I never imagined you, my own sister, would end up with someone like Larry," I replied to my sister with a touch of sarcasm. She glared at me briefly but then composed herself. "I've come to realize it's not just about appearances or status, it's about who someone is on the inside," she said earnestly. I couldn't help but stifle a laugh at her sudden wisdom about my husband's character. Holding back my amusement, I said, "That's wonderful to hear. I hope you and Larry find happiness together." It seemed my sister believed Larry was more than he actually was, perhaps even the president of our father-in-law's company. It was clear she hadn't heard the truth from him. After our discussion, my sister decided to move in and arranged for movers. Knowing how impulsive she could be, I had already organized a new apartment with just the essentials. I also hired a lawyer to prepare documents for dividing our property and determining alimony. The next day, after moving my belongings out, I began negotiations for alimony and dividing property with my husband and sister, alongside my lawyer. My husband remained passive, showing little emotion, while my sister did all the talking. "As I mentioned earlier, I'm willing to pay whatever alimony you ask for, so please take your time to decide," she said. Upon hearing this, my lawyer decided to pursue alimony from my sister as well as my husband. My sister is already making alimony payments to her ex-husband. I had been informed beforehand that it might be challenging to claim alimony from her. However, since she offered to pay whatever I wanted, I decided to proceed with the claim. During the property division negotiations, my sister eagerly pointed out, "This mansion originally belongs to Larry's family, so it shouldn't be included in the division of property, right?" Remaining calm, the lawyer responded, "This building and the land are owned by the company, so it's ultimately up to the company to decide." It seemed even my husband thought this house belonged to his father. "Is that so?" "I thought this house was Dad's," he casually remarked. On the other hand, my sister was surprised and turned to the lawyer, asking, "Wait, does that mean I can't live in this house?" The lawyer replied professionally, "Since it's owned by the company, you can continue living here if the company agrees." Relieved, my sister exclaimed, "Oh, you should have said that earlier. It's fine because Larry, the president, will still be here." This statement caught the lawyer off guard, who burst into laughter. "What are you talking about?" "Lisa is the president, not Larry," he clarified, looking at my sister who planned to marry my husband without knowing this crucial detail. She immediately turned to Larry and exclaimed, "Larry, you're not the president." Seeing his discomfort, I stepped in and explained to my sister, "Larry is an advisor without executive authority." I, on the other hand, am both an executive director and the president. Our father-in-law, who founded the company, was always the president. When he retired, he appointed me to these roles based on my performance, and there was no opposition from other executives. On the other hand, my husband was receiving an executive salary as an advisor, thanks to his father's arrangement, despite not having any executive responsibilities. It was more of a symbolic title than an actual role, and the salary was lower than what a regular employee would earn. This meant I was shouldering all our living expenses. Larry showed little interest in our household finances and didn't even know whether our home was owned by the company or his father. Although it was company property, my responsible father-in-law had always charged us rent. I had seen it as a standard rental arrangement, but the lawyer, still chuckling, asked, "Can we continue renting this house to Larry?" My sister was quick to react to the rent question. "Rent? Why would we charge Larry rent? It's company property, just let him live here for free." The lawyer then presented the rent amount, which startled both my sister and Larry, who seemed surprised to hear about it for the first time. "Looks like the rent for such a big house is pretty steep. I can't afford that on my salary," Larry remarked, realizing the financial strain it would pose with his modest executive compensation. Over our 6 years of marriage, Larry had exhausted most of his earnings. My own salary had also been swallowed up by high rent and living costs, leaving us with few assets to divide, mainly savings. After the lawyer left, my sister, now aware that the mansion she coveted was rented, appeared crestfallen and stared blankly. Meanwhile, Larry wore his usual grin. I suggested, "Why don't you move back to your parents' house? Your mom was thrilled about the pregnancy." Larry agreed, but inwardly I couldn't help but find the situation ironic, having to consider arrangements for a man who would soon be my ex-husband. I started to worry about whether he could responsibly raise a child, but I quickly dismissed these thoughts as irrelevant. Turning to my sister, who seemed to have forgotten about her own alimony situation, I asked, "Are you okay with the alimony arrangement, sis? You seemed confident earlier, but you're also paying your ex-husband, right?" Her expression shifted abruptly as she processed my question, snapping back to reality. "Alimony? I have to pay that too?" my sister exclaimed, clearly shocked and seemingly unaware of our earlier discussion. "You said you pay plenty of alimony earlier, but you didn't expect to pay it yourself, did you?" "My salary is really low," she continued, sounding incredulous. Larry and my sister exchanged surprised glances, and I couldn't help but feel like laughing at the situation. I had already finalized the divorce papers and alimony requests, so personally, it didn't affect me anymore. But watching Larry and my sister's reactions was almost comical. My ex-husband, who had remarried my sister and moved back to his parents' home as I had suggested, found himself caught in constant arguments between my sister and our in-laws. The root cause of these conflicts stemmed from the lie about my sister being pregnant with his child. His mother, hoping for a grandchild, was furious upon discovering the truth. Meanwhile, my father-in-law, who had never approved of my sister taking his son away from me, refused to even speak to her. He covered Larry's alimony payment in full, ensuring it was settled. Witnessing my sister's plea to our father-in-law, "Dad, could you please pay my alimony too?" was met with his stern response, "I have no reason to be called Dad by you," he retorted angrily. Disheartened and unable to achieve what she had hoped for, my sister left my ex-husband's family home abruptly, without saying a word, and disappeared. It seemed she had remarried my ex-husband solely to bear the burden of alimony, a decision that now seemed painfully naive. My ex-husband appeared to reconsider reconnecting with me, but his father rebuked him. "You're not the kind of man who should even think about starting a family. You can't even take care of yourself properly." Watching all of this unfold, I couldn't help but reflect on how we had reached this point. When Larry agreed to move back to his parents' house, I knew it was the right decision. While his mother was overjoyed at the prospect of a grandchild, I couldn't shake the feeling that Larry was simply not ready for the responsibilities of parenthood. His lack of engagement during our marriage persisted, and I doubted it would ever change. Seeing my sister's shock when she realized she had to pay alimony was almost amusing. She had been so confident earlier, but it was evident she hadn't fully considered the consequences. With her finances already strained, adding more payments would only worsen her situation. I couldn't help but wonder how she could be so naive. The negotiations for alimony and dividing our property proceeded smoothly thanks to my lawyer's meticulous approach. Everything was handled fairly and transparently. In contrast, Larry and my sister appeared bewildered and overwhelmed by the process. Their exchanged glances of surprise and confusion indicated they hadn't fully grasped the gravity of their circumstances. Moving out of the house marked a significant new chapter for me. I had already secured a new apartment and was ready to start afresh. Although I had once considered the house my home, leaving it behind felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Since it was company property, parting with it also symbolized letting go of the final ties to my life with Larry. After I moved out, tensions between my sister and my in-laws escalated. The deception about her being pregnant with my ex-husband's child caused an irreparable rift. My father-in-law, who had never approved of my sister, openly expressed his disdain. He saw her as the cause of disruption in our family, and this latest lie validated his concerns. When my sister asked my father-in-law to pay her alimony, he coldly rejected her plea. "I have no reason to be called Dad by you," he snapped, clearly furious. Her hopes for a comfortable life supported by my ex-husband's family shattered, leaving her without the expected support. In the end, my sister fled from my ex-husband's family home without a word, abandoning the turmoil she had stirred. Her plan to remarry my ex-husband and secure financial stability had disastrously backfired. Instead of finding security, she had only multiplied the problems for herself and those around her. My ex-husband, realizing the chaos he was caught up in, seemed to consider reconciling with me. However, his father, always the voice of reason, rebuked him harshly, saying, "You're not the kind of man who should even consider starting a family. You can't even take care of yourself properly." Ultimately, I moved on from the entire ordeal. I focused on my career and building a new life, leaving behind the turmoil that had engulfed my marriage. It was evident that Larry and my sister had their own paths to navigate, and I chose to detach myself from their complicated lives. The experience taught me valuable lessons about trust, responsibility, and the importance of making decisions based on personal integrity. I resolved never to reconcile with my ex-husband, even if he begged me. His betrayal with my sister and his indifferent demeanor had shattered any remaining faith I had in him. During our discussions, he lost his executive position and now works as a temporary employee. His behavior throughout our marriage and after the affair made it clear he wasn't reliable or trustworthy. His lack of commitment to our relationship and the company showed he wasn't suited for the responsibilities he had. Seeing him reduced to a temporary employee only reaffirms my decision to move forward without him. Being CEO has become the most important aspect of my life. It gives me purpose and fulfillment, keeping me focused and motivated. I take pride in improving the company for our employees and their families. Being CEO is now central to my identity, and I can't imagine giving it up. I'm not considering remarrying after our breakup. Starting a new relationship isn't something I'm interested in right now. I've been through too much emotional turmoil to even consider starting a new relationship. Right now, my focus is on myself and advancing my career. There are many goals I want to achieve, and I'm determined not to let anything distract me. I've kept in touch with my father-in-law, and he's been a great source of support and wisdom throughout everything. His advice has been invaluable whenever I face tough decisions or need guidance. My commitment to the company feels like a marriage in itself. For the sake of my employees, I dedicate myself fully to its success. This means hard work, dedication, and a passion to ensure our business thrives. I'm committed to providing job security and a stable future for our team, and their well-being is a top priority for me as CEO. This journey has taught me resilience and staying true to myself despite personal challenges. I've steered the company through steady growth and maintained a positive impact on our employees' lives, which motivates me every day. Ultimately, my focus remains on leading the company and supporting my team. I'm driven to create a successful future for all of us. While my personal life has had its challenges, my professional life gives me stability and a deep sense of accomplishment. This is where I draw my strength and where I choose to direct my energy moving forward.
I don't want to marry someone who only makes $900 a month. There's no reply from my mother-in-law on the phone. Maybe she's stunned. Hello, are you there? I'm talking about the mother of a man who only earns $900 a month. What are you talking about? I'm saying Aaron only makes $900 a month from his part-time job. I think you might be missing a zero. No, I'm not. It's really $900 a month. My name is Maria, and I'm a 29-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband, Aaron, for 5 years, and we live in an apartment. We don't have children yet, and though we're not rich, we live comfortably and happily, doing work we enjoy. About 6 months ago, things started to change. My mother-in-law, who lives nearby, demanded to move in with us. Despite our efforts to explain that we couldn't accommodate her, she didn't listen. To my surprise, Aaron supported her, which caused a lot of tension between us. Then Aaron made a troubling decision. After my father-in-law passed away a few years ago, my mother-in-law had been living alone and managing fine. But she started feeling uncomfortable being by herself and wanted to move in with us. The real reason, though, was that her house was old and falling apart. She didn't want to pay for the renovations, so she figured moving in with us would solve her problem. When we got married, Aaron promised that we wouldn't live with his parents. His parents' house is just a 10-minute drive away, so if she needs anything, we can easily go there. Also, I know my mother-in-law has never liked me and often makes sarcastic comments. If she moves in with us, she might become even more difficult. On top of that, she recently quit her part-time job and is now unemployed. If she moves in with us, we would have to cover her living expenses too, which we just can't afford right now. Despite this, my mother-in-law said, "Don't be so proud when my son supports you financially." I tried to explain that I work from home and Aaron doesn't support me financially, but she ignored me. She insisted that with Aaron's income, we could live comfortably, but we can't manage on his income alone. So I asked her if she knew how much Aaron makes each month. She replied confidently, "Of course. He's my son, and you're lucky he's well paid." Really? How so? If my husband's salary were really high, then a part-time job working just 3 days a week would pay well too, I said. My mother-in-law, acting superior, offered to handle the housework so I could focus on work. She then criticized me, saying, "You can't manage your finances well even though my son earns so much. Aren't you a big spender?" I responded, "No, I'm working hard every day and saving money. I'm not a spender." She then said, "Aside from money, this apartment is too small for 3 adults." When I mentioned that, she casually asked, "Do you want to move to a bigger place or buy a house?" Aaron, influenced by his mother, started to change his mind. I wondered if he couldn't stand up to her or if he actually wanted to live with her. He began to complain, telling me not to be so stubborn about his mother. He even said something that made me question his true feelings. "It's more enjoyable to live with my mother, isn't it?" Aaron asked. "What are you talking about?" "He says she'll take care of the housework for you. It would make things easier for you, Maria." Aaron seemed fully on board with the idea of moving in with his mother. I didn't know what to do. I tried to resist as much as I could, but out of frustration, Aaron took drastic action. While I was out for the day, he moved out of our apartment. When I came home that night and saw that his things were gone, I immediately called him. "Where are you? All your stuff is missing." "Yes, I moved out." "You moved out? Where did you go?" "I bought a house." "Bought a house? With what money?" Hello." It sounded like my mother-in-law was covering the phone. "Yes, that's right. My son and I will be living in the new house for a while. We might move in with you later if you change your mind. You probably can't even afford the rent there on your own. You better be sorry." "Okay, well, excuse me. Hello?" My mother-in-law kept making sarcastic comments, but I felt ridiculous and ended the call quickly. They bought a house? They must be lying. There's no way Aaron and my mother-in-law could afford a house with their finances. I don't know where they are, but they can do whatever they want. Honestly, I can live on my own without Aaron and manage financially. I was already paying the rent myself, so I'm not worried. I started seriously thinking about divorce. A few days later, I got a call from my brother. "Hey Maria, long time no talk. You know Aaron and his mother are at my house, right?" "What?" "My brother owns a house. After he bought it, he got transferred, and I've been managing the house since then." "Hold on a second." I immediately checked the safe in the bedroom. The key to my brother's house is missing. "Tom, the key is gone." "Did you call Aaron?" "No, I'm actually watching the house from outside." "I'm sorry, Tom. It's a long story. I think I have a pretty good idea of what's going on." "What should I do?" "We can call the police right away." "Yeah, but they're your family. I don't think the police will intervene." "That's true. I'm sorry. I'll handle it in a couple of days. Can I ask you to wait a bit?" "Okay, let me know if there's anything I can do to help." "Thanks." As soon as I got off the phone with my brother, I called my husband. "Oh, I hope you're feeling sorry by now." "Why is my mother-in-law picking up? Where are you?" "Oh, you don't sound very sorry, do you?" "Where are you?" "I don't need to tell you anything," my mother-in-law said smugly. "You're desperate, aren't you? You don't want to give up your husband with a $9,000 monthly salary," she continued. $9,000 salary? Who were you talking about?" "Of course it's my son. A son with enough money to buy such a splendid house." Ha ha ha. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. "What's so funny?" she asked, sounding offended. "Aaron said that if you don't listen to him, he's willing to divorce you." "I see. Then divorce is fine," I replied calmly. "How stubborn are you? If he dumps you, he won't be able to make it on your own, will you?" "Of course I will," I said confidently. "I don't want a husband who only makes $900 a month." There was no response from my mother-in-law on the other end of the phone. Maybe she was speechless. "Hello? Are you there, the mother of a man who only makes $900 a month? I asked again. What are you talking about? She finally replied. I'm saying that Aaron makes $900 a month from his part-time job. I explained. I think you're missing a zero, she said. No, I'm not. It's $900 a month. When I asked Aaron about his salary, he said around 9. Yes, that's right, around 9, I confirmed. Well, I guess it's hard to believe that your son only makes $900, I said. $9,000 is quite a high salary, she replied, still clinging to her misconception. It was thanks to my salary that we could pay all our expenses. By the way, my salary is around $500. You mean $5,000, according to how you're thinking. I'm not being supported by him. My husband quit his job a few years ago. Since then, he's only worked part-time 3 days a week. When I told my mother-in-law about this, she didn't react. I continued with my story. By the way, the house you're living in right now, the one you think my husband bought, it actually belongs to my brother. What? No, Aaron bought this house, she insisted. My brother bought the house, and I was in charge of it while his family lives in another area. He gave me the key, and Aaron took it without permission. What you and Aaron did is a criminal act, and I'm going to report it to the police. Wait a minute, my mother-in-law blurted out, clearly caught off guard. Okay, we'll leave, but please don't call the police. My mother-in-law hung up the phone, shouting. I'm sure she and Aaron are in a heated discussion now. When I went to check on my brother's house afterward, both Aaron and my mother-in-law were gone. They must have rushed back to her house in a panic. I immediately contacted my brother and apologized for the trouble my husband had caused. I still had one thing left to do, divorce my selfish husband. I signed the divorce papers and sent them to my in-laws' house. A short while later, my husband called me in a panic. You're kidding, right? I'm sorry, and I apologize about the house. So please reconsider, Aaron pleaded over the phone. I can't be married to a thief. Please enjoy living with your mother, whom you love so much. I can't stay with someone who doesn't respect me. Get a full-time job and good luck making $9,000 a month, I replied firmly. Aaron didn't sign the divorce papers right away, so I hired a lawyer. With legal help, the divorce was granted without much hassle. I was finally free from the impossible situation of dealing with my husband and mother-in-law trying to force me into living with them. My ex-husband and mother-in-law continued to live in their shabby house. Aaron tried to find a full-time job by going to the unemployment office, but because he had been working part-time for so long, it was difficult for him to find a company willing to hire him full-time. They are still living on his $900 income, and my mother-in-law had to start working part-time again. My mother-in-law now complains to him every day, and they fight constantly. I moved out of the apartment I had shared with Aaron and into a new place. I no longer have to support him financially, and now that I'm on my own, I can focus on my work from home even more than before. My income is steadily increasing, and once I save up enough money, I'm planning to buy a house for myself. Her husband just didn't understand his own situation, did he? If he had thought about it properly, he should have been grateful to his wife. Instead, because he didn't appreciate her, he ended up in this unfortunate situation. It's a good thing that Maria divorced him. Maria, enjoy your peaceful life from now on. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.
Ding dong, ding dong. Clatter, clatter, bang, bang, bang. Are you kidding me? Let me in right now. Do you want everyone to see me causing a scene here? Is this how you treat your husband who's been working on Christmas and comes home to this mess? My husband was furious, pounding on the gate of my family's home. Christmas is usually a special time for us, just before the big day. I accidentally found an envelope recently that revealed my husband's betrayals. As a wife and mother, I've been living through miserable and hopeless days since then. He had been working late, he said, but really he was spending our money on his girlfriend. He barely even bought presents for our kids. I couldn't stand it anymore. I opened the door and confronted him in front of my family. And then, what? What's going on? I'm just an ordinary housewife, living with my husband and 2 children. Depending on your values, some people might spend Christmas Eve with a boyfriend or girlfriend and Christmas Day with their family. And that's how it was for me. I have a brother and a sister, and since we were young, if any of us were dating someone, we'd spend Christmas Eve with them. Our family does things a bit differently from others. We don't always celebrate Christmas on the 25th because of our jobs. Both our parents and us have work that keeps us busy even on holidays. So instead, we made our own tradition, celebrating Christmas when we all had time off during the winter break. We cook together, enjoy cake, and watch special year-end TV shows. As we grew up and became independent, my brother, sister, and I kept up this tradition in our own ways. A few years ago, I got married and had children of my own. At first, celebrating Christmas Eve with my husband and our child was a joyful time. But over time, our relationship changed from being romantic partners to focusing more on our family as a whole. Christmas Eve started to feel more like a routine than a special occasion. Eventually, we both agreed that our children's happiness was what mattered most at Christmas. Any discussion about what to do on Christmas Eve slowly faded away, so when my husband said, "Sorry, I might be stuck at work overnight on the 24th. The kids celebrate Christmas on the 25th, right? I'll try to be back by then," it felt like a natural progression of how our Christmas traditions had evolved. I wasn't particularly emotional when I realized my husband wouldn't be home for Christmas Eve. It was just another sign of how our relationship had changed over time. Despite this, I still love him deeply and I'm content with our life together. So I focused on preparing for our kids' Christmas alone, considering it another form of happiness. "Hey, is this all the money we have for living expenses this month? Did something unusual happen with your paycheck?" I hate to sound critical, but expenses always pile up at year-end. I was hoping we could stretch our budget a bit more with Christmas coming up in about a month. I was shocked to see that the money my husband gave for living expenses was significantly less than usual. I quickly pleaded with him. If I could have managed it, I would have done so already. Things are tight on my end too. There are work-related parties and expenses that I have to cover upfront for the new year. Do you think I enjoy cutting back like this? Managing our budget with limited resources is also a crucial part of being a housewife, isn't it? My husband seemed visibly frustrated and avoided looking at me or talking further. "You're right, sorry. I'll do my best too, but it's almost Christmas, right? The kids are eagerly waiting for their special presents. Please, for their sake, let's make this time of year special. I don't want us to not afford their gifts. In our family, there's a rule. Normally, if the kids want something, they have to explain why they need it. But for birthdays and Christmas, they can ask for anything without conditions. That's why I wanted to ensure we have enough money for them, thinking about how much they love Christmas. Honey, let's be a bit more careful with our spending. Kids, what do you want for Christmas?" My husband sighed loudly and called the kids over. I want a cartoon DVD set, but I also want a picture book about trains, Dad. Which one do you think is better?" "Well, the book, definitely. It will help you learn to read, and you can share it with your friends at their houses. You could even read it to younger friends. You'd be such a cool big boy. I really want a new doll set so I can feed it and sleep with it, but my crayons broke recently and now I can't draw. I wonder which wish Santa will grant." "I think crayons would be great, Lena. You're so talented at drawing, and I love seeing your artwork. Ask Santa for some really nice ones, even better than the ones you had before." "But what about the dolls? Can't you listen to what I want? Santa only visits good children. Naughty kids who are selfish get nothing." "I'll ask for crayons." While pretending to listen to the kids, my husband clearly pushed them towards the cheaper options. Aaron's gift can be from a used bookstore, and Lena's gift can be from the dollar store. This way, we won't have to spend extra money on Christmas. "Do you think spending money is the only solution? How foolish," he sneered, making sure only I could hear him. "Extra expenses? That's not saving money." My husband called our children's eagerly anticipated presents extra expenses, manipulating their innocent minds to suit his agenda. I began to deeply resent such behavior from my husband. Then, after a while, "Mom, look, a sparkly letter. It was in Dad's work bag. Could it be from Santa?" While my husband was in the bath, my daughter had apparently opened his work bag and excitedly showed me the beautifully decorated envelope she found. "You shouldn't have taken that without asking. Give it here and I'll put it back, okay?" What could it be? I took the envelope from my daughter. Since it hadn't been opened, curiosity got the better of me and I peeked inside. A reservation for a Christmas dinner for two at a hotel on the 24th. But he was supposed to be working overnight on the 24th. Several questions raced through my mind. Just then, my husband's phone made a notification sound. Startled, I glanced over at his phone. It seemed to be getting a flurry of messages in a short span of time. Normally, I wouldn't pay much attention to his phone or how often it rang, but with a sense of unease, I reached for it. "What's going on?" My eyes fixed on the screen. All the messages flooding my husband's phone were from someone named Nancy. Judging by the selfie that appeared to be her profile picture, she was much younger than me. Although I couldn't see the content of the messages, the heart emojis made it clear they were not just from a casual acquaintance. It seemed too coincidental. A small dark suspicion about my husband began to grow within me. Once I started doubting him, it was hard to let go of those feelings. For the next few days, I found myself sneaking peeks at my husband's phone. Those days were enough to turn my suspicions into conviction. Nancy was likely my husband's mistress, and he planned to spend the Christmas dinner with her on the 24th. He even hinted at an extra special gift for her, that her excitement for each other uncontainable. To get more concrete information, I hired a private investigator. Catching my overly confident husband in the act seemed easy, and the results came back quickly. According to the investigation, Nancy was a temp at my husband's company. They had started their affair a month ago, and all the nights he told me he was working late were actually spent with Nancy. The recent drastic cut in our living expenses was likely to fund his affair with her. Clutching the investigator's report, tears of frustration overflowed. In just 1 month, my husband had come to prioritize another woman over his family. My efforts in taking care of the house, believing he was busy with work, and our children's kindness in holding back their desire to play with their father, all felt unbearably pathetic. The shock of my husband's betrayal was too significant to ignore. I didn't know what to do at first, but I have a plan of my own. I won't let this slide without a fight. Wiping away my tears, I stood up energetically and began to prepare my own special gift for my husband. On the morning of December 24th, I sent off my husband as usual, then I headed to my parents' house with the kids. "Welcome, it's been so long since we've all been together like this. It feels just like when you, your brother, and your sister used to live here," my mom said. "Spending quality time with Dad is great, but this year felt especially exciting." At my parents' house, they were delighted by the festive Christmas atmosphere, enjoying decorating a large Christmas tree they had pulled out of storage. With the kids, we spent the entire day having a fun Christmas party. The next morning, the kids were ecstatic about the presents placed at the base of the Christmas tree they had decorated. For my son, I got a DVD and a picture book, and for my daughter, a doll and crayons. We told them these gifts were from Santa and also from Grandpa and Grandma. The kids played happily with their new toys while the adults watched them with smiles. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I looked at my phone and saw I had a call. I stepped outside to answer it. It was my husband, sounding very upset. "Hey, where are you? I just got home from work, but my key doesn't fit the lock and the doorbell isn't working. What's going on?" I could hear him messing with the door handle through the phone. "Calm down, you're making a lot of noise. No one is there because we don't live there anymore. We finished moving out yesterday. You were too busy with work to notice, I guess. By the way, you've been shaking that doorknob for a while. Isn't that kind of like trying to break in? If you break the door, it's not my problem." I laughed at him. Even though he was still confused, he realized I had tricked him and started yelling angrily. "Don't mess with me, doing all this without telling me. Where did you put my stuff? Bring it back now. All your things were taken by your parents yesterday. They kept apologizing to me, saying how sorry they were for what you did. Make sure to apologize to them when you get back." "What? Huh?" After finding out about my husband's affair, I told both our families everything. I explained how he was obsessed with a younger woman named Nancy, spending our money on her instead of on our family. He even cut down on our living expenses and the kids' Christmas gifts. He lied about working overnight just to be with her, and I decided to ask for a divorce. After I told everyone through tears, my parents, his parents, our siblings, and even the kids supported my decision. So we moved out of the house on Christmas Eve while my mother took care of the children. Our siblings also helped with the move. With everyone's help, we emptied the house quickly, which brings us to now. So everyone knows what you've done, and no one in the family is on your side. You caused this mess, and now you have to deal with it. I explained everything to my husband clearly. By the time I finished explaining everything, my husband was furious and started shouting at me. "You worthless woman! Your disrespectful attitude towards me, your husband, is the real problem here. I am the precious only son, you know. Blaming others while you're no saint yourself, acting all high and mighty. My parents siding with you. Ha, you must have played the victim and cried to them. Who do you think my parents will ultimately believe, their precious son or some outsider woman? You're as foolish as ever, Hava. I'll be demanding alimony from you right away." "Oh really? Then go ahead and talk to them now. Here, be my guest." Saying that, I turned on the speakerphone on my cell. "Then I never thought you were such a rotten person. Are those the words of someone who has committed adultery? You are the worst. You're the shame of our family." Where did it all go wrong? May and Lars, who had been by my side during the call, unleashed their anger at my husband over the phone. "Dad, Mom, why are you with her?" My husband began to tremble, utterly taken aback by the unexpected rebuke from his parents. "Why? Because it's Christmas. Maitline, who is back at her parents' house, invited us to spend the day with her. Even though we are the parents of the man who betrayed his family. Do you understand how Maitline felt all this time? While you were betraying her, she was working hard to take care of the children on her own. We've never been so ashamed and embarrassed of you. We won't defend you unconditionally. You're an adult and made your choices. Do what you want, but don't involve us again. We refuse to be used by you." May and Lars scolded him, their voices trembling with anger. Their words made me so happy I couldn't hold back my tears. "What? You're at Maitlane's parents' house? Anyway, I'm coming over, so listen to my side of the story. It's unfair to only hear one side at times like these, right? You'll see who the real victim is, right, Dad?" Regardless of our situation, my husband tried to win his parents over, but it was pointless. Without listening to his claims, my father-in-law hung up and turned off the phone after saying a few words to me. Then he turned off all our phones, including Maitlane's, and said, "Let's go back inside. The kids are waiting for their mom." My father-in-law said this with a gentle smile, and my mother-in-law gently patted my back. We all went back inside together. We then had the most enjoyable Christmas party ever, with delicious food, cake, and the children singing and dancing. As the night went on and the children fell asleep, the adults were relaxing when the doorbell started ringing non-stop. Tension filled the room. Everyone knew who would show up uninvited at this hour. "Yes, it's me. Open the door. Are you going to leave me out in the cold on a winter night?" My husband not only kept pressing the doorbell but also started rattling the doorknob as if he might break it. Panic set in, and I was about to go to the door when my parents stopped me. I looked at everyone, nodded, and decided to speak to my husband through the door. "Did you forget? Christmas Eve is for lovers and Christmas is for family, right? We're all having a lovely Christmas together as a family. Did you have a nice Christmas Eve with Nancy? Now that we're strangers, I don't care what happens to you today. If you don't want to sleep outside in the cold, just leave. Don't provoke me. Should I call the police? Spread rumors in the neighborhood that a cruel wife kicked out her husband for no reason. Open this door right now." No matter what I said, my husband refused to listen and continued causing a scene outside. I started feeling afraid at his persistence. Trembling, my father-in-law smoothly stood up. He exchanged glances with my mother-in-law, who also rose to follow him. My parents and I hurried to the front door with them. When my father opened the door, expecting me to give in, my husband stood there defiantly. "Long time no see, Dad," my husband said smugly. "It's not good to see you. Stop pretending we're friends. You're no longer a son to us, just someone who hurt our family," my father interrupted coldly. My mother joined in, causing a scene at this hour. "Do you even know what time it is? It's incredibly rude. The kids have been asleep for hours. You're not fit to be their father." She glared at him sternly. My husband was shocked to see my usually gentle mother so stern. "I won't let my grandchildren see this anymore. Leave. You're a nuisance. You're no longer part of this family." My father-in-law spoke calmly but with anger, making it clear my husband had to leave. My husband glared at us, looking like he might explode. "I'm calling the police right now," my mother-in-law said firmly. Seeing her pick up the phone, my husband panicked and fled without saying a word of apology. It was another stark reminder of who he truly was. I didn't cry anymore, but I felt an emptiness inside, questioning the purpose of everything I had been through until then. "How about some warm tea, and then you can get some rest?" My mother gently touched my shoulder with a kind smile. Everyone welcomed me back with warmth and understanding. I went to my room, grateful for the unwavering support of my family. Meanwhile, my husband, now without a home, went to his parents' house. They had changed the locks after hearing my side of the story, so he couldn't get in. They turned him away when they returned, unwilling to let a stranger into their home. Left out in the cold, my husband finally realized the gravity of his actions and his parents' words. Now he sincerely regrets his actions and has agreed to the divorce and alimony. I had a lawyer ready just in case, but thankfully it didn't turn into a messy legal battle. After the divorce was finalized, I started a new life at my parents' house with my children. I'm focused on my work and raising my kids with the loving support of my parents. It's busy, but every day feels meaningful. Although I won't see my ex-husband again, I stay in touch with my in-laws. They're wonderful grandparents to my children and a great support to me. Even though we're no longer family on paper, I hope they'll always be part of our lives and continue to watch over the children as they grow. Do you both have everything? Let's go. Don't forget to say goodbye to Grandma and Grandpa. Bye. I silently prayed for these ordinary, peaceful days to last forever and looked forward to celebrating next Christmas together as a family, seeing my children's happy smiles.
The police suddenly said, "We've quickly taken a child found in the car to the hospital. You're under arrest." I was shocked when they showed up at my house and couldn't believe what they were saying. "What? I don't have a child," I replied, confused. The officer looked confused too. They said they found the car's owner through the license plate and it was registered in my name. Could this be true? I had a feeling, so I rushed to the hospital where the child was taken. There, I saw a boy about 5 years old lying on an emergency bed. His face was red and rough, but my heart raced when I saw his familiar face. From that moment, my life changed completely with this child at the center. I am Emily, a 33-year-old who works from home. I started dating my husband, Michael, when we were in college together in the same club. And we got married after graduation. We've been married for 10 years but couldn't have children. We even tried fertility treatments, but I found out I had a condition that made it hard to conceive. Michael, being kind-hearted, told me, "It's okay. Let's live happily, just the two of us." My in-laws are nice, and since my brother-in-law already had a child, they never pressured me. But I felt bad for my parents, who were hoping for grandchildren. I live near them and visit often. If only my brother John had a child. I have a younger brother, John, who is 7 years younger than me. Maybe because he was the youngest, he started hanging out with bad influences in middle school. He says it's because our parents compared him to me, the smarter and more accomplished older sister. But from my perspective, our parents treated us equally. Still, John rebelled and caused a lot of trouble. At 20, he said he was cutting ties with the family and left home, disappearing without a trace. I haven't seen him since then. Sometimes I look through old photo albums and remember the days when John, as a toddler, would follow me around, calling me sis. One day, while I was working from home, my doorbell rang nonstop. I panicked and checked the camera, seeing the police at my door. They suddenly announced, "We transported a child found in a car. You're under arrest." I was shocked and speechless. "What? I don't have a child," I said. The officer looked just as confused. I had so many questions. The police explained that a passerby had noticed a car abandoned on the road with a limp child inside and reported it. The child was taken by ambulance to the emergency room. When I asked where the car was, they said it was in front of my parents' house. Unfortunately, my parents were away on a trip. The police identified the car's owner from the license plate. While the car was registered in my name, the person using it was my younger brother, John. I used to lend my car to John when he got his license, and he took it when he left home. Since then, the car has been left in front of my parents' house only when it needed inspection and maintenance. Despite scolding him, my parents felt sorry for John and took care of the car, thinking he might need it. But who was the child left behind in the car? Hurrying to the hospital, I approached the bed in the emergency room and saw just the top of a small head peeking out from a blanket. The curly, wavy hair instantly reminded me of someone. My heart raced as a childhood memory of John flashed before my eyes. Getting closer, I saw the face of a boy around 4 to 5 years old who looked strikingly like John. Could it be? Just then, I received a phone call from my mother, who was away and sounded panicked. John called and asked me to take care of his child. He said he left the child in the car because we were not home. Under this blazing sun, what should we do? I reassured my worried mother that the child had already been taken to the hospital and seemed likely to survive. She sounded relieved and said she would be back soon. I understood my mother's feelings. There was no time for a trip now. I knew this child was my brother's. But when was he born, and who is his mother? I explained to the police that he was probably my brother's child and decided to stay with the boy. After that, I tried calling my brother several times, but couldn't reach him. Looking at the child, he seemed to be in pain. Seeing such a small body enduring so much hurt broke my heart. At that moment, a nurse came and handed me the clothes the child had been wearing before changing into hospital pajamas. They were worn out and very dirty, with the name Tom written on the tag. From his extreme thinness and the state of his clothes, it was clear that Tom had been living in a very tough situation. That evening, my mother returned from her trip and rushed to the hospital. "John," she murmured, holding Tom tightly with tears in her eyes. Tom looked a lot like John. By the next day, Tom's condition had improved, but he seemed very scared. I gently asked him, trying not to scare him, "How old are you, Tom?" "I'm 5 years old," he replied, holding out one hand and counting his fingers. "Wow, you speak so clearly." I praised him and stroked his head, and he smiled for the first time. Still, Tom seemed thin, pale, and small. The doctor said he had bruises all over his body. I convinced the police to let us take care of Tom until we could reach John, and somehow managed to avoid filing an official report. 3 days later, Tom was ready to leave the hospital. I didn't want him wearing his old, ragged clothes, so I bought him new ones and dressed him in them. He looked even smarter and cuter in his fresh outfit. As we were leaving the hospital, I finally managed to get through to John on the phone, but there was a lot of noise on the other end. "How could you leave him in the car under the blazing sun? He ended up in the hospital," I shouted in frustration. "He survived, didn't he?" "So it's fine," John replied casually. He had bruises all over his body. "Did you do this?" I demanded. "Thomas is clumsy. I was just teaching him discipline," John retorted, showing no remorse. I was speechless. He's only 5 years old. He's struggling. He can't even remember his letters no matter how many times I try to teach him. It's frustrating, so I left him at our parents' house. I was shocked by my brother's harsh words about his own son. Considering it might be best for Tom not to be with such a parent, I was even more appalled when John added, "I'm in the middle of a casino jackpot right now," and abruptly hung up the phone. Seeing Tom, who looked visibly worried, begin to silently shed tears, I gently said, "It's going to be okay," and comforted him by stroking his head. At 5 years old, it's natural to feel scared and cry, but he didn't seem to be asking for his dad or mom, which struck me as unusual. I couldn't help but wonder why, and it pained my heart. After discussing with Michael and my parents, we decided that Tom would stay with us at our home. At home, I prepared a kid-friendly lunch with hamburgers and fries, adorned with colorful character flags. When I set the plate in front of Tom, his eyes lit up. "I've never seen food like this before. Can I really eat it?" he asked. "Of course, Tom. I made it just for you," I assured him. I loved watching him eat, with ketchup all over his mouth and a big, crunchy smile. In the evening, Tom had a blast playing in the bath with Michael, laughing and having a great time. At bedtime, I'd read him picture books while lying next to him. He listened attentively with sparkling eyes, but sometimes he'd look at me with a worried look. "Can I stay here forever? I don't want to go back home anymore," he pleaded one night. "I understand. You want to stay here with us, right?" I asked gently. Tom nodded with relief, and it broke my heart to see him feeling that way. As the days passed, he grew even closer to me and Michael. He'd offer to help fold laundry or try to carry my shopping bags with his little body when we went out. Living together, I discovered what a kind and wonderful child Tom was. Michael and I grew very attached to him, and we began discussing the possibility of adopting him, especially if John and his partner weren't planning to raise him. When I checked with the city office, I learned that my brother and his wife had registered Tom's birth, and according to their address records, they were living with Tom at our parents' house. We started the process of consulting with family court about adoption. About a month after Tom came to live with us, John and a young woman came to visit. "Hey, thanks for taking care of Tom, lol," John said casually. "I don't want to go back," Tom whispered, quickly hiding behind me. He must have had some frightening experiences. It had been years since I'd seen my brother, and he looked more confrontational than ever, with disheveled clothes. The young woman with him, who introduced herself as Riza, had multiple piercings in her ears and nose and dressed flamboyantly. "How did you find out where I live?" I asked, puzzled. "Mom told me. By the way, sis, you're living in a nice house and having a great life, huh?" "I have something to discuss about Tom." "Let me in," John said. I felt uneasy, but I couldn't refuse when it was about Tom. According to my brother, he had married this woman shortly after leaving home. They had been moving around a lot, and there were times when they lived in their car because they had nowhere else to go. While he looked around my house, my brother suddenly got to the point. "I heard from Mom that you don't have any children, right? You've been married for 10 years with no kids, so maybe you can't have any," he said. "What are you trying to say?" I asked, feeling a sense of foreboding. "We have a great idea. If you want Tom, how about it? But it won't be for free," he said bluntly. I was shocked by John's audacity, trying to sell his own son for money after previously trying to leave him with our parents out of annoyance. I was filled with anger. "John, do you realize what you're saying? Tom is not some object to be sold." "What?" Acting all righteous now. "I rebelled because of your seriousness. Our parents always favored you," John sneered. "It's ridiculous to blame our parents and me for your own choices." "Shut up. Just give me the money," John demanded, raising his hand as if to strike me. In that moment, Tom, who had been hiding behind me, stepped forward. He stretched out his arms, trying to shield me from John. Seeing this, I felt even more determined to protect Tom. "John, selling your own child for money is absolutely wrong," I stated firmly. Despite my initial outrage, I decided to give them the $13,400 I had saved in my dresser as a settlement. I also had them sign an agreement that they would have no further involvement with Tom and obtained their consent for the adoption. John's wife callously remarked, "It's a relief not to have to deal with such a troublesome child," shocking me with her indifference. Once the paperwork was finalized, they took the money, smirked, and vanished. From that moment on, Tom truly became our son, and we completed all the necessary legal procedures. The days that followed were filled with happiness. Tom thrived and grew healthy, and as a couple, we found our lives enriched with smiles and joy thanks to him. During this time, we began to notice Tom's talents and were eager to nurture them. However, 15 years later, another incident unfolded when my younger brother and his wife paid us a visit. John now sported a scruffy beard, messy hair, and looked much older than his 41 years. His wife appeared disheveled, with no makeup, wearing dirty clothes and torn plastic sandals. It was clear they were going through tough times and living a rough life. I had a sinking feeling because their visit couldn't bring anything positive, and unfortunately, my dependable husband Michael was at work that day. "What brings you here?" I asked cautiously. "I need some money," John replied bluntly. "Why should I give you any money?" I countered, feeling uneasy. "I'm surprised. I thought Tom was just a dumb kid, but he got into a top medical school, didn't he?" John said, revealing he had heard about Tom through someone in our neighborhood at a local tavern. In reality, Tom was very bright. He had excelled in school since elementary years and earned admission to a prestigious medical program right after high school. "That's no longer your concern," I said firmly. "It's a big deal. He's my son. And since he turns out to be such a great kid, I thought I'd take him back," John stated. "What?" I exclaimed, shocked by his audacity. "If you don't like it, how about you give me $33,500, John suggested. "Didn't I already give you $13,400 15 years ago?" I countered. "That's a different situation," John insisted. "I can't give you that much money," I firmly refused. John grabbed my collar and threatened me, asking if I wanted to get hurt. It hurt more emotionally than physically, seeing my brother act this way. Just then, someone shouted, "Stop it," and grabbed John's arm. It was Tom, now a strong 20-year-old. Tom easily subdued John, who ended up lying face down on the floor. My brother's wife, seeing Tom all grown up, said warmly, "You've grown so much. I'm your mom. I've wanted to see you." But Tom stood firm, declaring, "My only parents are the mom and dad of this house. I remember the terrible things you did to me when I was just 5. I felt love for the first time when I came here. You are not my parents." Even after Tom's heartfelt words, John and his wife didn't seem ready to give up. So I showed them the agreement we had made 15 years ago. It clearly stated, "We will have no future involvement with the child. If we fail to comply, legal action will be taken. You've broken your promise. I'm calling the police," I stated firmly. They looked visibly shaken, trying to make excuses that they had forgotten about the agreement. In reality, we're being chased by debt collectors. Without $33,500, we're in serious trouble. Please don't be so heartless. Help me out, sis. You're well off, right? John pleaded. Despite his earlier threats, now he was begging. "I can't help you. The moment you abandoned Tom, you lost any connection with me as well. You're no longer my brother," I said firmly. "Please," John begged, desperate and defeated. I firmly rejected John's pleas. Helping him would only enable his behavior to persist. As their insistence continued, I was on the verge of calling the police when they reluctantly left. Later, I learned that the couple had been arrested for shoplifting and were now leading a troubled life in jail. Meanwhile, Michael, Tom, and I continued to live peacefully and happily. Seeing Tom's determination to become a doctor and help those in need fills my heart with joy. Thanks to Tom, our days are filled with laughter and contentment. We look forward to continuing our happy life together.
My name's Audrey and today I turned 30 years old. I want to tell you all about how I became a millionaire because of two very greedy people. They say what goes around comes around. I first met my husband Gavin on a work trip our office organized. We both led different departments and had never crossed paths before. The trip had lots of activities like games and sports. During a volleyball game, I got hurt and sprained my ankle. Gavin was quick to help me, carrying me to get first aid. I thought he was really kind and wanted to get to know him better. After the trip, I reached out to him and asked if he wanted to go for coffee. He said yes, and we met up at a local cafe. During our date, we talked about the trip, our interests, and our families. I realized we had a lot in common. We liked the same sports, TV shows, and hobbies. Gavin told me about his family, especially his strong bond with his mother, Meg. He mentioned, "I've always been really close to my mom. We make sure to visit each other at least twice a week." "That's nice that you're close to your mom. What about your dad?" I asked. Gavin responded, "He actually left us a few years ago, and we don't really keep in touch." "I'm sorry to hear that. Is everything okay between you two?" "It's complicated, Audrey. Let's just say things didn't work out." "What do you mean by didn't work out? He's your dad, not your boyfriend." "Yeah, it's just, he wasn't very supportive, so my mom and I decided to part ways." "Was it because of financial reasons or emotional ones?" "You know what? Let's talk about something else," Gavin interrupted. "Oh, sure, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. I just want to get to know you better. We can change the subject," I replied. I didn't dwell on it and figured it was a sensitive topic for Gavin. I believed that as we grew closer, he would open up more about his past. In the following weeks, we continued to meet, sometimes even during work. I started having lunch with him every day. Over a few months, we became very close, and our relationship started becoming serious. I knew Gavin's birthday was approaching, so I decided to plan a surprise party for him. I asked our friends to help with organizing and creating the guest list. Since Gavin was close to his mom, Meg, I thought it would be nice to invite her too. I debated inviting his dad, considering their relationship was unclear to me, and ultimately decided against it. The day of the party arrived, and after setting up decorations and preparing food, guests started arriving, eagerly awaiting Gavin's entrance. Just before Gavin was due to arrive, I noticed a well-dressed middle-aged woman heading towards the door. She wore a fancy green evening gown and carried a designer handbag. I approached her and introduced myself. "Hello, I'm Audrey. You must be one of Gavin's close relatives. It's nice to meet you." "How do you know Gavin?" Finally, someone with manners. "I'm Meg, Gavin's mother, and yes, I'm the most important guest here. He's my son, you know." "Of course, Meg. I didn't mean to offend. Gavin speaks so highly of you. Please come in and make yourself comfortable." "Well, I should hope so. I practically raised him all by myself. I hope you've done a decent job planning this party." "I've put in a lot of effort, and our friends have been a great help too. I hope you enjoy it," I replied calmly. "We'll see about that. Just make sure you don't interfere with my time with Gavin. He's my son, after all," Meg retorted sharply. "Of course, Meg. I wouldn't want to come between you two. Gavin values his relationship with you, and I completely understand that," I reassured her. Despite my efforts to appease her, Meg didn't seem impressed. She started loudly criticizing the decorations and began insulting some of the other guests at the party. Despite Meg's behavior, I remained composed and continued to show her hospitality, hoping she would eventually approve of me. When I heard Gavin's car approaching, I went outside to greet him. The surprise party went smoothly, and Gavin was genuinely happy with the effort I had put in. We enjoyed cutting the cake and exchanging gifts. During the party, Meg insisted on being next to Gavin in all the photos, even those with just Gavin and me. She also boasted that her gift was the best and confidently predicted Gavin would love it. I was surprised when Gavin didn't intervene or stop Meg's behavior. Instead, he accommodated all her requests and ensured she was always by his side. When it was time for dinner, everyone took their seats at the dining table. Gavin stood up, thanking everyone for coming to his birthday celebration. He mentioned he had an important announcement and was glad everyone was there. Suddenly, Gavin knelt down and pulled out a ring, asking me to marry him. I was thrilled and tearfully accepted amid cheers and congratulations. However, I noticed Meg had quietly left the table. Confused, I brought it up to Gavin. "Babe, your mom left the table. Is everything all right? We should find her and get her blessings. She'll be upset if we don't." "But why do we need her blessings? It's our decision, isn't it?" "You don't understand. I'd always discuss important decisions with my mom. We're really close and I value her opinion." "I understand she's important to you, but shouldn't we make decisions together?" I gently questioned. "Of course we do, but I can't just ignore her. She means a lot to me. Can we please find her and talk to her about giving us her blessings right away?" Gavin insisted. I was worried about how dependent Gavin seemed on his mother's approval, but I loved him and wanted her acceptance. We searched the house but couldn't find her. Eventually, we discovered her sitting quietly in the backyard. We approached her to ask for her blessings, which she reluctantly gave when Gavin insisted. "Mom, I'm sorry I didn't talk to you before proposing to Audrey. It happened in the moment, and I thought it was right," Gavin explained. "Well, Gavin, you always discuss big decisions with me. I felt a bit left out this time," Meg replied with disappointment. "I know, and I didn't mean to upset you. I planned to talk to you the next day, but the surprise party changed everything," Gavin tried to explain. I understand it was unexpected, but you should have found a way to talk to me before making such a big decision, Meg insisted. You're right, Mom. I should have found a way. I got carried away with the excitement, and Audrey has been incredibly supportive. I wanted to show her how much she means to me. I can see how much you care for her, Gavin. Just remember to keep me in the loop, especially for important decisions. I promise, Mom. I'll do better at keeping you informed. You're a crucial part of my life, and I want you to be part of Audrey's and my journey together. That's all I ask, dear. Feeling uncomfortable overhearing their conversation, I decided to step away, though I knew I wasn't eavesdropping. As I turned to leave, just a few steps away, I couldn't help but hear Meg criticizing me. She said I wasn't good enough for Gavin and that I was only interested in him for his money, adding that I wasn't even beautiful enough. Despite her hurtful words, I chose to ignore them and carried on. Over the next few weeks, Gavin and I began planning our wedding. Meg didn't offer any help with the preparations but insisted on making decisions, like my wedding dress. When I expressed my desire to choose my own dress, she threw a fit. She also met with me several times to insist I pay more than half of the wedding costs, claiming I was lucky to marry Gavin and should contribute more financially. I didn't let these incidents affect me too much, hoping Meg would warm up to me after the wedding. Finally, on my wedding day, I was in my dressing room with my bridesmaids and mother, getting ready in my beautiful white gown. Everyone around me complimented how stunning I looked. I heard a knock at the door and was surprised to see Meg walk in wearing a white wedding dress. "Why are you wearing a wedding dress today?" I asked. "It's my son's wedding day, and it's the most important day for me," she replied. "I chose to wear this dress to emphasize my role as the mother of the groom. I understand it's a big day for you, but traditionally, the bride wears white. It might overshadow Audrey," I gently pointed out. "Well, that's not my concern. Gavin is my only son, and I deserve attention on this day too," Meg insisted. "Of course, Meg, but today is primarily about celebrating Audrey and Gavin's love and commitment. It's their special day," I calmly reasoned. "I understand that, but I'm making a statement. My presence here matters as much as anyone else's," Meg asserted firmly. Though I was furious, I didn't want to create a scene and spoil the day. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, and we exchanged heartfelt vows and rings. It was an emotional moment, marking the culmination of our long-awaited journey together. During the wedding planning, I had asked Gavin to handle the guest list. I noticed his father wasn't included and asked him about it. "Gav, are you sure about not inviting your father?" I asked gently. "He abandoned us. He doesn't deserve to be part of such an important celebration," Gavin replied firmly. I wanted to persuade him otherwise, but I decided not to push the issue further to avoid upsetting him on our special day. The next few months after our wedding were filled with happiness. Gavin and I cherished every moment together and began planning to buy our own house. We had always dreamed of living together and decided that getting married was the first step toward that goal. We started looking for our dream home, spending hours every day searching for options. One day while I was at work, Gavin called me. "Hey babe, I'm sorry, but an important meeting came up. I won't be able to go house hunting with you today," he explained. "No worries, darling. It happens. Don't stress about it. I can handle it on my own," I reassured him. "Thanks for understanding. I'll make it up to you, I promise," Gavin replied. "You better. Just focus on your meeting and we'll catch up later. Love you," I said. "Love you too, babe," Gavin replied warmly. After work, I got into my car and headed to the property location. Looking at the details, I noticed it was a unit on the 10th floor of a building still under construction. When I arrived, I met with the realtor who mentioned another visitor had arrived under our name to view the property. Knowing Gavin was occupied, I was puzzled about who it could be. To my surprise, it was my mother-in-law waiting at the door, looking impatient. "Why are you here to see this property?" I asked her. "I wanted to make sure it's suitable for my son and that there's a place for me when I visit," she replied bluntly. I wasn't keen on Meg being involved, but to avoid upsetting Gavin, I let her join me. As we toured the house, Meg didn't hold back, criticizing the building's condition and dismissing the property as below her standards. By the end of the tour, I was frustrated and eager to leave. The realtor stepped away to take a call, warning us about the construction hazards. I started walking around and saw an incomplete staircase outside the house. Without noticing, Meg came up to me and suddenly kicked my right leg. I lost my balance and fell down the stairs. I couldn't move and felt soreness on my arms and head. When I looked up, I saw Meg smiling as if she had won something. Then she quickly turned and left. I was confused and unable to move for a few minutes. Eventually, I found my phone in my pocket and called for an ambulance, which arrived quickly. On the way to the hospital, I couldn't stop thinking about how Meg had tried to hurt me by pushing me down the stairs. I had always been kind to her since we met, so I felt sad and angry about her actions. At the hospital, they treated my injuries and I had to have some scans done. I tried calling Gavin several times, but he didn't answer. Eventually, the medication they gave me made me fall asleep. The next morning, I called Gavin again, and this time he answered. I told him everything that had happened between Meg and me. "You're making this up, Audrey. Are you seriously saying my own mother pushed you down the stairs?" Gavin exclaimed. "I'm not lying. I would never make something like this up. I fell because Meg kicked me. She intentionally hurt me," I replied, trying to stay calm. "You're just trying to defend yourself. My mom wouldn't hurt you for no reason," Gavin argued. "She accused you of being aggressive. I can't believe you're taking her side over mine. She pushed me down those stairs and now she's lying to protect herself. Please, stop defending her." I pleaded desperately. "I can't come to the hospital right now. Meg's in shock because of what you did, and I need to be with her," Gavin replied firmly. "You're choosing her over me after everything we've been through. You brought this on yourself. Maybe you deserve this for what you did," Gavin concluded coldly. Devastated, I started crying and ended the call. I felt lost and spent the next 2 days in grief and shock. Gradually, my injuries started to heal, and I regained my strength. My parents visited me and were shocked by the situation and Gavin's reaction. My father suggested looking into Gavin's father to uncover the truth, suspecting Gavin and Meg were hiding something. Following his advice, I hired a private investigator to locate Gavin's father, Neil, and contacted him. Initially confused about who I was, Neil eventually grasped the situation. "You know, I divorced Megan and left the house because she and Gavin were using me for my money. I'm the chairman of a big company, and Gavin wanted to steal from me," Neil revealed. "I had no idea. That's awful. I can't believe they would do something like that," I replied, shocked. "Yeah, it was a hard decision, but I couldn't let them take advantage of me anymore. I want you to know that those two are never up to any good," Neil warned. "Thank you for telling me, Neil. I believe you, and I'm grateful you're looking out for me," I expressed. "Now I have a plan to handle this situation. I need you to somehow get Gavin and Meg to visit you at the hospital tomorrow morning," Neil instructed. "Why do you want them to come here?" I asked, curious about his plan. "I need to confront them about their actions and protect you from any further harm. It's time they face the consequences of their greed," Neil explained firmly. "All right, I'll do my best to get them here, but please be careful. I don't want anything bad to happen to you," I cautioned. "I'll handle it, Audrey. Just focus on your recovery," Neil reassured me. I was skeptical and somewhat scared, to be honest. I didn't want to see either Meg or Gavin because I couldn't bear to face a man who trusted his mother over his own wife, and who hadn't bothered to check on me in the hospital. Meg because I feared she might try to harm me again. But I knew if I wanted to expose their wrongdoing, I had to trust Neil. I called Gavin and told him I had a special gift for him and Meg as an apology for what had happened. I said I wanted them to come to the hospital to receive it, emphasizing its value. Hearing this, Gavin and Meg eagerly agreed to visit me the next morning. The next morning, Neil arrived at the hospital with flowers. I greeted him warmly and expressed my gratitude for his support. Just as we finished talking, Gavin and Meg walked in. They both froze in surprise and stared at Neil sitting calmly in a chair. "Neil, what's going on? Why are you here?" Gavin demanded. "I couldn't stand by and watch you and Gavin manipulate Audrey any longer," Neil replied calmly. "Manipulate? We haven't done anything wrong. She's the one causing trouble," Meg interjected defensively. "That's not true. Audrey has been through a lot because of both of you. It's time to put an end to this," Neil asserted firmly. "Dad, you're messing everything up. Audrey and I love each other," Gavin protested. "I divorced your mother because of what you were doing. You were trying to take advantage of me and my company. I was simply trying to protect my own future," Neil explained. "Dad, you never supported me. You know that. I wouldn't have given you anything you asked for, yet you still tried to transfer my company into your name behind my back," Gavin argued. "I don't want Audrey to go through the same ordeal. I have something here to ensure that doesn't happen," Neil declared, handing Gavin some papers. "What are these?" Gavin asked. "Divorce papers. Gavin, so Audrey can finally be free from the toxic influence of both of you," Neil revealed calmly. Meg and Gavin were stunned. They started arguing loudly with Neil, pleading with him to reconsider. Neil stood firm, telling them they deserved the consequences of their actions for trying to harm someone innocent like me. He then called hospital security to escort Meg and Gavin out of the room, and they were removed. I had been through a lot, but finally, I had my justice. Neil and I maintained a strong friendship from then on.
"Kate, what are you doing up so late? Where are you?" "I'm on a spa vacation with Luna." "Oh, I understand now. I discovered everything when my husband lied to me. I'm Kate, a 30-year-old office worker. I've been married to my husband Daniel for 6 years, and we have a 6-year-old daughter named Luna. Since we got married when I was pregnant, Luna is growing up to be a wonderful child. Mom, I can help you. Really? Can you roll the hamburger patties like this? Yes, I can do that. There you go. Oh, Luna, you're really good at this. Here's one for Dad and one for Mom. This one is for Daddy. He's had a tough day at work, so he gets the big one. He might be so happy he'll cry. While I was having fun cooking with my daughter, my husband came out of the bath. Luna ran to him and said, "I made your hamburger, Daddy." He was happy too and said, "Really? I can't wait to eat it." We were enjoying our time as a happy family, or so I thought. Both my husband and I work, but he has a shorter commute and less overtime than I do. Because of this, I often ask him to pick up our daughter from kindergarten. Recently, he's been coming home late due to work, so I've had to pick her up and bring her home myself. My daughter said sadly on the way home from kindergarten, "I wonder if Daddy doesn't like me anymore." I think she misses him because he used to pick her up, and now he comes home very late. Sometimes he doesn't even get to see her. I gently patted her head, even though it hurt me to see her upset. Daddy is working really hard for you right now. Once things calm down, he'll be able to spend more time with you. Really? Yes, so let's support him together with Mommy. Okay, I'll cook for him. She's such a sweet girl. I'm looking forward to the day when we can all eat together as a family again. But a few months later, my husband was still working long hours. He came home very late. Before, he used to be home by the last train, but now he's coming home at 2-3 a.m. or even taking the first train in the morning. Are you sure it's all work? If you're just out drinking, I wish you'd come home and spend time with Luna. I couldn't take it anymore and told my husband how I felt. My daughter has been missing her dad for a month and looks really sad. My husband didn't like what I said and got upset. Huh? What's with the tone? I go to work parties for the family's sake. It's unfair to accuse me like that. Okay, I'm sorry, but you need to understand that Luna is feeling lonely because she doesn't get to spend time with you. After I said this, he went quiet and went straight to the bedroom. Since then, things have been awkward between us. Then, I was told by my company that I needed to go on a short business trip. There were a lot of things I needed to check in person, so I might have to stay 1 or even 2 nights. My first concern was what to do with my daughter. My parents lived too far away to help. I would have to ask my husband, but with how busy he's been, I wasn't sure if I could rely on him. Still, I had no other choice, so I waited for him to come home. I wondered if he had been out drinking again, and sure enough, he came home late. It was well past midnight, and around 3 o'clock, I heard the door unlock. Welcome home. Kate, I didn't know you were still up. My husband was surprised to find me waiting for him. I had stayed up because I needed to talk. Huh? Talk? He came home drunk, his face red, but now he looked pale as he sat down at the dining table and stared at me. So, what do you want to talk about? It's not a big deal. But he seemed unusually upset. I told him about my upcoming business trip. It was short notice, but I had to leave in 2 weeks on Friday. I'd need to stay at least 1 night, and possibly 2 if there was a lot to do. I couldn't help but notice how strange he was acting. Can you take care of Luna while I'm away? I know you're busy with work, I asked, feeling apologetic. My husband looked relieved. Oh, that's totally fine. Really? Yeah. Are you okay with work? Of course I'm busy, but I need to put you and Luna first. How about I take a day off and take Luna on an overnight hot spring trip? I haven't had a chance to spend time with her lately. I'm sure Luna would love that. I was relieved to hear my husband say that. It showed he really cared about our family. I had been worried lately about whether he truly cared, but it seemed my concerns were unfounded. The next day, while taking my daughter to kindergarten, I told her the news. What? Daddy and I can go on the hot spring trip together. She was so excited and happy, which made me happy too. When the day of my business trip arrived, it went better than I expected. It was my first trip since having Luna, but everything went smoothly. The people I met were very helpful and made sure everything was in order for me to check. The work went so smoothly that I finished by 7 p.m. that day. I thought, since I'm done, I might as well go home tonight. I wasn't sure if I'd be staying 1 night or 2 without knowing the status of my work. I planned to spend the first night at a manga cafe instead of a hotel to avoid cancellation fees. If I got a ticket, I could catch the last train home. I wanted to spend a relaxing evening at home if I could, so I hurried to the train and headed home. I imagined my husband and daughter enjoying a delicious meal at a hotel. The thought of my daughter's happy face made me feel better. I decided that I'd wake up early the next morning, clean the house thoroughly, and surprise them both. With that in mind, I arrived home around 11 p.m. I wondered why the light was on in the living room. Did my husband forget to turn it off? Frowning, I walked inside and found my daughter curled up on the sofa, crying. "Oh, Luna, what's wrong?" "Mommy, why are you crying? Where's Daddy?" My husband was nowhere to be seen. I was so upset I immediately started asking Luna questions. "Daddy left this morning without me." "What? What is going on? What was my husband thinking?" I was furious with my husband's crazy behavior, but I needed to calm Luna down first. I hugged her tightly. "I'm so sorry. I know you were lonely being alone so late at night." As I held her and stroked her head, she seemed to relax and started to fall asleep in my arms, exhausted from being scared and anxious. I gently carried her to bed, then went back to the living room to call my husband. "Kate, why are you calling at this hour? Where are you?" "I'm on a spa trip with Luna." "Why are you whispering?" "Luna is already tired and asleep. I don't want to wake her." "Oh, I see. I'm sure she's asleep, but she's not with me." I realized my husband had lied to me. I was close to losing my temper, but I managed to stay calm. "How's the trip going?" "It's great. I wouldn't mind staying another night. The food is good, and the hot springs are wonderful." "Well, why don't we stay one more night then?" I said that, and my husband sounded unsure. "But Kate, you're coming home after one night, right? If you do, you'll be alone, so Luna and I will come back tomorrow." I knew exactly what he was worried about. He was afraid that if I got home first, I'd discover he had left our daughter alone. So I decided to lie. "Well, I've got a lot of work to do, and we'll be home later than planned. I'll need to stay another night, so don't worry about me. Enjoy your trip as long as you like." He didn't question my lie at all. "Really? Then I'll extend the trip for one more night." Luna is really excited. I need to give her more time with her daddy since I haven't been able to spend much time with her recently. "Okay, just make sure to call me when you know when you'll be back." My daughter's excited. "What are you talking about?" She was curled up and crying by herself. I held back my anger and ended the call. I was determined to make him face the consequences for the pain he caused Luna. I called my parents and explained everything. Then I quickly started packing my things and contacted a moving company. Luckily, I found a company that could come that day, so I arranged for them to move my stuff out. My daughter looked confused as she saw several men coming in and taking things out of the house. "I need to talk to her." "Luna, I've decided that we're not going to live with your dad anymore. I don't want you to be sad anymore. I'm going to quit my job and move in with Grandma and Grandpa so I can spend more time with you. But if we move to Grandma and Grandpa's house, you won't be able to see your dad. What do you want to do?" I knew it was tough to ask such a question to a 6-year-old, but I wanted to know her thoughts. "Will I never see Daddy again? If you really want to see him, I can arrange for you to visit him occasionally, but he won't be living with us anymore." I wanted my daughter to have the chance to see her father if she wanted, even though I doubted he would make time for her after the divorce, especially after leaving her alone at home while he went on vacation. As I was thinking about this, my daughter seemed to come to a decision. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I'm going with you, Mommy. Daddy probably doesn't care about me." I cried and asked him, "Why are you leaving me?" But he didn't answer and just left. I was deeply hurt that he made our 6-year-old daughter feel this way just so he could go on a vacation with his mistress. I felt he was a terrible man, a lousy father, and worthless. I regretted leaving my daughter with him and going on a business trip if it meant this would happen. "Luna, I'm so sorry for making you so sad." I hugged Luna tightly, and we started working on the move. I decided to leave the rest of the issues with my husband behind and focus on settling in with my parents. A few hours later, my husband called. "Hey, why is all your stuff missing? And Luna's things too. What's going on?" "Don't you know why?" "Of course not. Luna's crying because her stuff is gone. Do you really think you can keep lying to me after all this?" "That's strange. Luna is now eating noodles that my mother made." "What? We already know you left your 6-year-old daughter alone at home while you went on a trip with someone else. How could you do that? You're not fit to be a father." If I hadn't come back that day, you could have traumatized Luna for life." My husband was stunned and silent, clearly not expecting me to be with Luna already. "Anyway, you left your daughter alone just to be with another woman. I can't stay married to you. I want a divorce." "Divorce? Oh no, please reconsider." "I can't. I don't want to see you anymore." While we were on the phone, I heard the doorbell ringing repeatedly. Oh God, who could it be at a time like this? My husband sounded annoyed, but I knew who it was. "Looks like they've arrived. Dad and Mom." I heard my husband's voice on the phone, followed by my father-in-law yelling, "What the hell are you doing?" And then a loud commotion. Well, that's the start. I guessed it was the sound of him getting beaten up. My father-in-law had practiced judo for many years and was now an advisor at a university. He adored his granddaughter, Luna. When I told him about my husband's infidelity and how he left Luna alone, he was furious. He said he was going to teach my husband a lesson. I decided to ask him for a favor. "What the hell do you think you're doing with your own daughter? I didn't raise you to be such an..." I could hear my stepfather's angry voice repeating his thoughts. Even though we lived in an apartment, I was glad we were on the first floor. If there were people living below, they might have complained. But since we'd already moved out, it didn't concern me anymore. My father-in-law really laid into my husband, both physically and mentally. After that, the divorce settlement went smoothly. I got full custody, and the alimony and child support were paid in one lump sum. I even managed to get alimony from the mistress. My husband tried to remarry the mistress, but she wasn't interested in a serious relationship and left him because he was too serious. At work, he's embarrassed about his affair. He's been disowned by his parents, dumped by his mistress, and now his daughter is with me. He's left with nothing but his own mess, and frankly, he deserves it. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying happy times with my daughter at my parents' house. My parents are farmers, so I help them out. My daughter loves eating fresh vegetables from the farm and enjoys being surrounded by nature. I'm committed to putting her first in my life. Leaving a young daughter alone for an affair? He should have faced legal consequences. I hope Luna isn't too heartbroken, but it feels good that my husband finally lost everything he had. Kate, I hope you and your daughter stay happy and continue to find joy together. My daughter is joining the company, so I need you to resign. Today is your last day. On the morning of the 20th, the president suddenly told me I was fired. I was shocked and didn't know what to say. The 20th was the day we paid our suppliers. Some payments were made through bank transfers for longtime suppliers, but I also made direct payments and visited them as a courtesy. "You look like you can go home right away. I'll give you the day off, just for you, so leave quickly," the president said. He pushed me out of the office, and the door shut with a snap right in front of my face. I didn't even know where to start to argue. My name is Emily. I joined this family-owned paving company right after high school and worked as a clerical worker for 10 years. Well, until just now. The company had about 20 employees, and when the current chairman was the president, the workplace atmosphere was great. It was an easy place to work. The chairman, now retired, used to work closely with the younger employees, and his wife, Catherine, would come in every day to help with various tasks until he was hospitalized. Their daughter, Kelly, was skilled in both field and office work. Her husband was the site manager and was trusted by the on-site employees. Even though they were the founding family, they never acted superior or looked down on the employees. It would have been wonderful if this enjoyable and smooth-running company life had continued, but unfortunately, reality wasn't so kind. At the end of last year, the chairman was diagnosed with cancer during the company's group medical examination. He decided to retire as president and appointed Kelly's husband, the site manager, as the next president. Both the employees and I unanimously agreed. We all thought the chairman should focus on his treatment and wish for his long life. However, suddenly, the chairman's eldest son, Tom, appeared with his family. I didn't know where he heard the news from. It turns out the chairman had another child besides Kelly. Tom had been disowned about 30 years ago, and I didn't know about it at all. According to the senior employees, Tom was a troublemaker in his youth and often had run-ins with the police. Whenever he caused problems, the chairman and Catherine would go and apologize. After dropping out of high school, he got involved in multi-level marketing and fraudulent activities, which finally led the chairman to disown him. Despite being out of touch for a long time, Tom suddenly appeared one day, pleading with his father, "Dad, I've realized my mistakes. Please forgive me. I was shocked to witness this in our small company, where the president's office and clerical room were one and the same. Tom expressed a desire to reconcile and work in the company, but his past made it hard to believe his sincerity after being disowned. I apologize to everyone, but I ask you to give Tom another chance, the chairman said, pleading with everyone present. Kelly and the senior employees knew about Tom's troubled history and couldn't fully celebrate, but they couldn't refuse the chairman's heartfelt request either. So Tom and his family moved into the annex of the chairman's house, with Tom becoming an employee and his wife taking on household duties. I saw their daughter only once when she visited the company. She seemed to be a college student. The chairman believed Tom had changed for the better after facing hardships in life. Catherine was overjoyed that Tom had returned with his family, talking about rebuilding the company together. However, soon after, a problem emerged. Tom insisted on something. I'm the eldest son, so I should be the next president, declared Tom, straining his relationship with Kelly and the site manager. Despite pretending to work diligently in front of the chairman, Tom actually did very little. He frequently made demeaning remarks like, physical labor is for the workers, and you're all just worker ants, work silently. Naturally, his behavior quickly made him unpopular with everyone. Some of the younger employees even went directly to the chairman, saying, I can't work under these conditions. However, both the chairman and Catherine pleaded with everyone, saying, we will talk to Tom about this. Please try to see the bigger picture. Then, due to stress or other reasons, the chairman's cancer suddenly worsened and he was hospitalized 3 months ago. Tom declared, I am the president. Despite employees advising the chairman and Catherine to stick with their original plan of appointing the site manager as president, they ultimately chose Tom, their biological son, over their daughter's husband. This decision sparked grumbling among some employees, who felt the chairman and Catherine were biased by parental love or losing their sharpness with age. The once harmonious company atmosphere turned tense and uncomfortable. As tensions grew, Kelly and the site manager began working behind the scenes to manage the company. This left me alone handling all administrative tasks, whereas before Catherine, Kelly, and I shared the workload. Now, I regularly work overtime, sometimes leaving so late that the date changes before I head home. Meanwhile, Tom seems to view administrative duties as effortless, spending his days at hostess bars, betting on horses, or gambling. My relationship with the president took a serious downturn over an expense issue. He had been using the company's credit card for personal dining and entertainment expenses, and I had been overlooking it to some extent. However, this time, the expense crossed a line. With apprehension, I handed the receipt back to him. I can't approve this expense, I told him. What? Why not? He demanded. This is for your wife's corrective underwear. It's not related to business, so it can't be expensed. As expected, the president's face flushed with anger. Don't challenge me. She's the president's wife. It's natural for her to dress well. This is a valid expense. No, that's not how it works. Your wife's underwear can't be considered a business expense. I stammered, struggling to comprehend how the president could justify a $4,000 expense for his wife's corrective underwear. His next suggestion left me even more bewildered. Then let's turn selling corrective underwear into our new business venture. We'll categorize it as inventory, so it counts as an expense. The president seemed pleased with his idea, but I was at a loss for words. We're a paving company, I managed to say. So what? We can threaten clients that if they don't buy from us, we'll cancel their contracts. Everyone will buy. It's easy money, $2,000 for one, $4,000 for a set. The president chuckled loudly, but I felt horrified. That's absolutely unacceptable. It will damage our credibility. I snapped at him in anger. From that moment on, I became the target of the president's disdain. Day after day, I endured constant berating from him. The situation became so difficult that I considered quitting many times. However, I continued to endure and work, driven by my loyalty to the chairman who had always supported me and my concern for the team who would struggle if I left. The truth was, I couldn't afford to lose my job suddenly either. I decided to tough it out until the right moment to move on. But then, unexpectedly, I was fired. If I quit abruptly now, it will cause problems for our clients, I thought to myself. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my courage and confronted the president. I can't do this. I can't just leave without proper notice and handover. Even your daughter wouldn't be able to handle the workload. Besides, today is the day we need to handle payments, I said in one breath, fully expecting the president to erupt in anger. As expected, the president's face turned red with anger. Shut up. I told you to resign because my daughter is joining the company. Today is your last day. As for the payment, let them wait until they come to collect it. There's no need to pay them up front. Excuse me, isn't it normal to pay for something once you buy it? I was shocked and explained it patiently, as if talking to a child. But the president responded with something so unreasonable that I couldn't believe he was being rational. If that's the case, just threaten to switch suppliers. Tell them we won't make the payment this time, so they should give it to us for free. What? That's not something we can do, is it? I was so stunned that I couldn't find the right words to respond. You're completely useless. My daughter has a college degree. She can handle office work easily. As family, she won't question my expenses like you do. You're all talk and no action. We don't need someone like you in our company. Leave now, the president sneered. It seemed clear he intended for his daughter to handle accounting so he could justify personal expenses as business expenses. Oh, is that so? Just remember, I won't regret this, I replied. Words were futile at this point. My patience had worn thin. I quickly gathered my belongings and left the company, feeling sorry for our clients. I called Kelly, despite knowing Catherine and Kelly were busy with the chairman. This was urgent. I explained everything and trusted the rest to Kelly. Once I left the company, I suddenly found myself with nothing to do. Being fired without notice clearly violated labor standards laws. If I reported this to the labor standards office, the company would be in trouble. Since our company was part of the middle company payment system, I could claim my severance pay and 1 month's salary. This system supports small and medium-sized enterprises that can't afford severance pay on their own. I didn't need to rush because I could apply within 5 years from my retirement date, and the Labor Standards Office had a 2-year statute of limitations. With my professional habits, I planned out the necessary procedures and timeline for retirement. I decided I could take it easy for at least a week. Lately, I had been working overtime and weekends nonstop, leaving no time for myself at home. There were many places I wanted to visit once I settled down, so I chose to go on a day trip to the beach for a refreshing break. After enjoying myself at the beach, I checked my phone in the locker and found several missed calls, emails, and voicemails. Among them, Kelly's email caught my attention. It said, "The payment process went smoothly. Everything is in order." I felt relieved. Despite the abruptness of my dismissal by the president, I couldn't shake the guilt of leaving my job in anger. Next, I listened to the voicemail from the company. It was the panicked voice of the president saying, "Hey, what's going on? They're saying I'm not the real president. Did you know about this? Explain yourself." After chuckling at his realization, I continued to check my emails and voicemails. Among them was a message from the chairman, so I promptly headed to the hospital. Arriving at the hospital room that evening, I found Catherine and the president already there. As soon as the chairman saw me, he greeted me from his bed. "Emily, I'm truly sorry for my foolish son." "Hey, what's going on? I'm not the official president. Explain yourself." Tom shouted arrogantly, clearly not understanding the situation. The chairman quickly silenced him with a stern command. "Quiet down." It turned out that right after I had called Kelly, she promptly informed the chairman and Catherine. Upon receiving the news, the chairman immediately contacted Tom, who was acting as president, and asked, "Do you really not know anything? So what's the truth?" I calmly explained to the president, who was still shouting in confusion. "Essentially, Tom, you didn't have any legal authority. Your role as president was just a title. It might seem confusing, but in business terms, president is a position within the company and doesn't hold legal standing like a representative director does. The representative director is the one legally responsible for the company's actions externally. It's a different and more formal role that requires specific legal procedures to change." I continued, "While the title of president can be changed informally within the company, altering the representative director involves complex legal processes. That's why your position didn't carry the legal weight you assumed it did." 3 months ago, when Tom was appointed president, there was strong opposition from Kelly, the site manager, and veteran employees. That's when I proposed a strategy. Tom would be a figurehead president while the chairman remained the legally responsible representative director. As someone familiar with company procedures and laws, I knew the complexities involved. Under my plan, if Tom showed genuine dedication and won over all employees, then we would initiate the legal process to formalize his presidency. However, if Tom failed to prove himself fit for the role, the backup plan was to either remove him or even consider closing the company, while Kelly and the site manager prepared to launch a new venture. Kelly doubted Tom's ability to change. The chairman and Catherine continued to believe in Tom until he unfairly dismissed me, which seemed to awaken them to his shortcomings. If you want to be a leader, learn and take care of your employees. I've told you this many times, the chairman emphasized. Tom retorted, "It's not a big deal, right? Can't we just handle the procedures now?" "No, it's not possible," the chairman explained. "Our company offers stocks to employees who want them, and many of them own shares. Emily owns 10%, making her a major shareholder. We can't disregard her views, and other shareholders won't support you either." As the president began to understand the gravity of the situation, his face paled. "What? I don't have any shares." "None. I plan to pass on my shares to you once you prove yourself as president. I'm deeply disappointed in you. Were you only interested in my wealth, thinking I didn't have much time left?" The chairman slumped in despair, and Catherine remained silent, visibly upset. Defiantly, the president responded, "Well, I'm the eldest son. What's wrong with taking what's rightfully mine? The company belongs to me. I can't forgive you anymore. The chairman bears full responsibility as the representative director of this company. Moreover, I'm a shareholder. I have the right to call for a shareholders' meeting and propose your removal," I asserted firmly. The president's face drained of color as he grasped the implication of removal. "You mean I could be fired? Dan, you were just a clerk." "Tom, Emily is right. At this point, no one will support you. Emily was the only one who spoke up to give you a chance," Catherine interjected. Then Catherine turned to me. "Emily, I owe you a sincere apology. I regret causing you trouble because of my love for my son. Please tell me what you'd like to do." I confronted the president directly. "Mr. President, I no longer wish to work under your leadership, so I am resigning immediately. However, I expect to receive my severance pay, along with 1 month's salary including unpaid overtime and holiday pay. As a shareholder, I will also take action through the Labor Standards Office to remove anyone who is detrimental to the company." I spoke calmly, and as I did, the president's complexion shifted from pale to completely white. Continuing, I informed them how Kelly had been actively visiting clients and successfully promoting our new company. Many clients had already decided to switch from our current company to the new one, and most of our employees were planning to follow suit. "That's impossible. I'll sue you," the president threatened, his voice cracking. But the chairman intervened firmly. "I am the representative director. You have no such authority." The president collapsed to his knees, and I felt a mix of emotions: regret, disappointment, and a sense of closure. "Mr. President, it's unfortunate it had to end this way. If you had changed your approach upon returning, things might have been different. There were ample opportunities for understanding if you had made efforts to learn and adapt. Ultimately, it was the president himself who squandered those chances, a classic case of reaping what one sows." In the aftermath, the chairman decided to shut down the company, leaving Tom unemployed. The president's wife attempted to sell corrective underwear, but it didn't succeed. They faced legal issues for aggressive sales tactics and were eventually arrested for involvement in a pyramid scheme. When Kelly returned to her parents' home, she found boxes of unsold underwear left behind. As for the daughter, she found employment elsewhere, although the specifics are unknown. I now work happily at Kelly's and the site manager's new company. I cherish my relationships with others and strive to live authentically each day.
My husband Oliver told me, "I married you because you're the boss's daughter," with a smile. I was sick in bed, looking at the scarves and gloves I'd knitted for him tossed aside without care. His words hurt, making me realize I needed to confront him. "Oliver and I have been married for 5 years. We don't have kids, but we've been happy together. He's always busy with work, which sometimes leaves me feeling lonely. But he tries to make time for us on his days off, which helps." I met Oliver through my dad, who used to be his boss. Oliver suggested I stay home after we got married, which seemed like a good idea at the time. It gave me time to pursue my hobbies like sewing and knitting. Every winter, I made Oliver scarves and gloves. At first, they weren't very good, but I improved over time. Oliver started saying they were as good as store-bought ones, which made me happy and encouraged me to keep sewing. One day I told Oliver, someday when we have a child, I want us to sew together. He smiled and replied, maybe I'll learn when the time comes. I always supported Oliver, took care of the house, and made sure we spent time together on his days off. With his high salary, we seemed to live a privileged life to outsiders. I was content with this life, imagining a quiet future with my kind husband and our child. About 2 years ago, our peaceful life was interrupted. I suddenly felt dizzy and collapsed while waiting for Oliver to come home. He rushed me to the hospital. When I woke up in a hospital bed, I overheard Oliver talking to the doctor. My symptoms were serious and likely something I would have to deal with for life. It wasn't life-threatening immediately, but it could happen again. Given my condition, doctors advised me to stay in the hospital until I recovered somewhat. Seeing my anxiety, Oliver reassured me, you'll be here for a while, but don't worry. I'll visit whenever I have time off from work. We'll get through this together. His words and his hand in mine eased my worries. With him by my side, I felt everything would be okay, despite not having any real guarantees. True to his promise, Oliver visited me nearly every day after that. He held my hand, checked on me, and brought my favorite sewing tools when I mentioned how boring the hospital days were. We spent time sewing together and chatting about little things that happened each day. Teaching him to sew was surprisingly enjoyable, and it helped pass the time. But after about a year, the regular visits dwindled. Instead of daily, Oliver started showing up only every few weeks. I figured he must be busy with work and continued sewing, planning to give him the finished scarf I was working on when he visited next. The doctor said I'd be discharged by the end of the year, so I also started making gloves to give him. After a long time apart, I poured my emotions into making the gloves for Oliver. But when he finally visited, he looked coldly at the gloves and said, "Are you still making these? It's annoying." He handed me back the scarf I'd made and divorce papers. The scarf, which I'd worked on tirelessly, looked brand new, untouched since I gave it to him. "You've been in the hospital for 2 years now. I heard you're getting discharged soon, but I can't keep taking care of you," he said. "Let's get a divorce." I looked at the divorce papers. Oliver had already signed them. I thought, so this is how it ends. Truthfully, I'd thought about this possibility ever since he stopped visiting regularly. I tried to convince myself he was just busy with work, but I knew the real Oliver wouldn't neglect me like this. If work had gotten in the way, he would have told me. When he stopped coming without explanation, I knew this was coming. That's why I managed to ask calmly why he wanted a divorce. I wasn't trying to hold on to Oliver. In fact, I knew I had probably become a burden to him. If the kind Oliver I knew wanted a divorce, then I guessed I had no choice. But since Oliver had promised we face things together, I was curious why he had changed his mind. When I asked him, still dazed, Oliver replied harshly, "Isn't it obvious? Since I married you, it's been nothing but trouble. I'm tired of those scarves and gloves you give me every year. I only married you because your father's the boss. How am I supposed to handle you getting sick on top of everything?" He laughed at me mockingly, saying he was fed up with dealing with me. It seemed he resented my innocent enjoyment of our life together. Whenever I talked about happiness, love, or loneliness, he seemed to think I was foolish. Who even wears handmade scarves anymore without feeling embarrassed? Getting those things from you is annoying and a hassle. As Oliver spoke, I noticed he was wearing a luxurious scarf that I hadn't given him. It was clearly better quality than the ones I had made. I wondered if he had never used any of my gifts before. Perhaps they had always annoyed him, and I hadn't realized. After I got sick and my father retired, Oliver no longer had to pretend to care about me at work. Having a sick wife became a convenient excuse for him. In the first year, he made a show of visiting me between his work duties. I could imagine my father, before retiring, praising Oliver at work for being a good husband who worked hard while looking after his sick wife. Oliver had crafted this image for himself and was well liked by his colleagues. That's what he wanted, and it seems my value to him was only realized when I fell ill. When I confronted him with these thoughts, Oliver looked surprised and admitted, "Well, it did make things easier at work. Whenever I mentioned you, people were sympathetic and treated me well. If I worked late, I was praised for being dedicated. If I needed a break, I just had to say my wife is, and that was enough." He said this without a hint of regret. He had cleverly used my illness to his advantage in ways I hadn't known. "And as for my upcoming promotion, well, they may be idiots, but I owe it to your illness," he added. As I listened with my head bowed, I looked up when he finished speaking. Instead of the man I loved, I saw a cruel grin on his face. I realized this was his true self. Well, if I could be of some use, then that's good. "We probably won't see each other again, so take care," I calmly said, returning the divorce papers to him. He took them without a second glance and swiftly left. That marked the end of our marriage, and I silently cried. After some time, I left the hospital and moved back in with my parents. When my father heard what had happened, he was outraged. "I never expected him to be like that," he said. But I had already made my peace. I reassured my father and told him I wanted to stay with them. After tidying up the house, my parents understood and encouraged me to do what made me happy. For now, that meant living with them. Before moving back with my parents, I decided to visit our old house. But when we arrived, the front door lock was broken. Perplexed, we rang the doorbell and were met by a stranger. I asked him about it, and he told us he had bought the house a few months ago and was now living there happily with his family. My parents were furious, but I chose not to disturb the new residents and quietly left. Unable to leave it be, I called my husband right away. He casually replied, "Yeah, I sold it while you were in the hospital. Keeping the money is my compensation. It was my house originally, so you can't complain, right?" His nonchalant words made me sigh. I wish he had told me sooner, I thought. From what I learned, the house had been sold about a year ago, around the time he started showing less concern for me. Even if he had planned to divorce me, selling our home without discussing it was shocking. Although we had finalized our divorce by signing the papers, we still needed to discuss dividing our assets after my discharge. We had scheduled a meeting for the following week, but my husband had acted on his own, which was beyond belief. When I calmly confronted my husband over the phone, telling him he didn't understand anything, he seemed puzzled. "What do you mean?" he asked. I replied, "I'll explain next week," and hung up. I smiled at my concerned parents and asked my father for a favor. I shared my plans with him and asked him to get everything ready. "I've already prepared all the necessary documents. There's not much time before our meeting next week, but we'll manage," my father said, with a slightly worried smile. As my father, he probably felt guilty for introducing me to my husband. His anger toward my husband spurred him to do everything possible to help me. I thanked him and looked forward to our meeting day. Just imagining my husband's face made me smile for the first time in a while. With my father's support, I got ready for the meeting. We decided to meet at my parents' house. We sat in a row, my parents and I on one side, and my husband on the other. He must have known my parents were hurt by the divorce, but he seemed indifferent now. He probably felt there was no need to respect my parents anymore. He remained composed, even showing a hint of a smirk. His attitude was disrespectful and arrogant. "I'm the one who's been wronged here, but I don't plan to ask for too much," I said calmly. "The money from selling the house will be enough," my husband replied, trying to appear generous. My father's face turned red with anger, but I gently placed my hand on his to calm him. We knew that in this discussion my husband was the one at a disadvantage, so there was no need for us to get overly upset. "Before we proceed, there's something important to discuss," I continued, and my father handed over a document. It proved that the land under the house my husband sold belonged to my father. "Yes, the house was in your name, that's clear. But the land belongs to my father, and he holds the title," I explained, showing him the document. My husband frowned slightly. "So what? The house was still mine. No one can complain. Do you think this gives you a way to get back at me?" He chuckled as if he found the whole situation absurd. "It's true that legally, selling the house under my husband's name posed no issues, even though the land belongs to my father," I explained further. "However, this creates a significant problem for the family who bought the house. You sold the house, right? But since my father owns the land, he could demand rent from the family living there. Wouldn't that cause trouble?" I questioned. "We're not planning to take that step, but we won't give up our land rights for nothing. In this situation, our plan is to offer the family the opportunity to purchase the land. We won't ask them to leave or charge rent monthly, but it would be problematic if they refuse to buy the land. Originally, my father intended the land as a gift for us to live on, not to be given away freely to strangers. If they refuse, the family who bought the house might even sue you because the deal wasn't as they were led to believe. Imagine their frustration buying their dream home only to find out they have additional expenses." After we confirmed my father's ownership of the land, we went straight to the family who bought the house. When we explained the situation, they were understanding. They agreed that if there were any legal issues, it would be the seller's responsibility, meaning my husband. They mentioned they might sue him if negotiations failed. Seeing my husband's face go pale, I knew he realized the seriousness of the situation. He understood he could face significant financial consequences. In a shaky voice, he asked, "What should I do?" I smiled and replied, "The family could buy the land from us to settle everything smoothly. You'll have to cover that cost. Once they own both the house and land, all current issues will be resolved. Since they weren't informed of the land's value when buying the house, they might demand compensation from you. But that's their decision. The problem is, due to its prime location, the land could be worth more than the house. Even if my husband sells all his assets, it might not be enough. In the end, he could be left with nothing. Alternatively, you could buy back the house and pay for the land, along with a relocation fee to the family. This would return both the house and land to your possession. You could then sell them again, possibly making some money. However, after paying the relocation fee, it's unlikely you'd end up with much, I explained. Either way, you're facing losses, I continued. And regarding alimony, your actions have caused me significant mental distress. I intend to seek compensation for that, so keep that in mind. I've come to realize you used me as a pawn for your career ambitions. Now that I know this, I'm repulsed by everything you've done, and I plan to pursue damages for the emotional distress it's caused me. While evidence may be limited and winning uncertain, discussing this matter is crucial given your current situation. Cornered, Oliver may soon face these harsh realities, my father added. Despite being retired, I still have many connections from my career. I've been in touch with former colleagues who have shared your opinions and actions regarding my daughter. You're being looked down upon by everyone, Oliver. With a cheerful smile, my father shared the news, and finally, Oliver understood the gravity of his situation. The status he had built at work, using me and the money from selling the house without my consent, was slipping away. Now let's discuss what happens next, I said, clasping my hands together and smiling. It was a different smile from any Oliver had seen before, brighter since our separation. You must understand that the fate of your assets will be decided today, I continued. Drawn in by my words, Oliver could only manage a forced laugh, tears in his eyes. The negotiations favored me, and Oliver agreed to pay alimony. We also settled that Oliver would compensate for the land where the house stood, which we then explained to the family who bought our house. In the end, everyone benefited except Oliver, who lost everything. The rumors my father started spread through the company, causing Oliver to lose his status and halt his chances for promotion. As the rumors continued, Oliver found himself isolated, and eventually my father informed me that Oliver had resigned. It's tempting to see it all as karma, as gains made through exploitation are fragile. What Oliver thought he had achieved turned out to be fleeting. As for me, I'm living in my parents' home now and teaching sewing classes. My classes aren't packed, but I earn a decent income thanks to local participants like neighborhood women and children. Although I couldn't have children of my own, as I once mentioned to Oliver, I've discovered that sharing my passion brings me genuine happiness.
I had just finished making dinner for everyone in the family, except the wives. That's okay. I felt happy inside. I looked at my husband and father-in-law. They both agreed with me. Finally, I could say it. It's okay. I'll eat what I made. But then, I remembered something in my bag. I found it, a letter addressed to Mother. My name is Molly. I married Kevin when I was 25, and 3 years later, we had our son. We had a happy life together. After our child was born, I went back to work, and we worked hard to raise our child. The biggest challenge in my life has been my mother-in-law. She's what you might call a control freak. Kevin always tries to please her, but when we first got married, it was tough. Kevin is the second of 3 siblings, and he's the only one who's married. The other 2 are still single. My mother-in-law always wants to be the center of attention in the family. She calls herself the Madonna of the family. It's all men here, and you know how difficult they can be. So I'm the Madonna of this family. Well, she really believes it. And then I entered the picture as the only daughter-in-law. My father-in-law and Kevin's siblings liked me, but I felt like I was seen as a rival in a way. I can't believe Kevin is getting married, my mother-in-law would say. Remember our family meals, she'd tell Kevin. What are you saying? Kevin would reply. It's true, Kevin. Even after you're married, you shouldn't forget the taste of our family's cooking. You should come over for meals. No, Molly cooks well, and we both work. We'll manage our own household. No, she'll make you do all the chores. That's not true. We decide what's best for us. Mom, I don't want to hear that from you. My husband is straightforward when he speaks, which I appreciate. He always supports me completely, but he sometimes misses subtle things and doesn't notice the situation as well. My mother-in-law tries to do things that are hard to notice. For instance, when we visit my in-laws, she prepares meals. It seems normal at first glance, but she never lets me help in the kitchen. Even when I offer, she insists I stay out. The food on the table all looks the same, and I'm not allowed to see what's inside. Once, I had a soup with lots of small fish bones in it. I didn't realize until I had a big gulp, and it made me feel sick. Another time, there was a steak with very bitter garlic mixed in, which was really unpleasant. Molly, are you okay? I think my stomach hurts. What's wrong? Oh, you don't like my food, do you? She's not feeling well. Please stop. Maybe she's just pretending to be sick. I don't think so. Hey, stop. Don't say that to someone who's not feeling well. Could it really be? Okay, everyone's taking her side. That's not what we meant. I made dinner for everyone. What's the issue? Don't worry, I'll finish it all. No. You startled me. What's wrong? Why are you yelling? It's just, I can't let you eat something that's cold. Don't worry about it. I said stop. But my mother-in-law didn't listen. She picked up the plate of meat and potatoes in front of me. What the heck? Oh, my husband threw away the food. Is this vinegar? It tastes completely different from what This has happened before. What? I once got served a soup full of tiny fish bones. Mom, what's happening? I didn't do anything wrong, you must have misunderstood. Of course not, this meat and potatoes taste awful. Here, try some. When my husband offered the food to my father-in-law, my mother-in-law took it from him. If it's that bad, you don't have to eat it. No, that's not what I meant. I'm asking why Molly's cooking is so bad. I have no idea. I think she did something. Enough is enough. It's unbelievable. You never let Molly in the kitchen, and seeing you take the plate like that makes me think something's up. Yeah, I think so too. Fine, I'm done. I'm never cooking another meal again. In the end, my mother-in-law neither admitted nor apologized for the situation, and my husband saw this as a reason to stop visiting his family. With that, we had to. The rest of the day was calm, until I saw something unbelievable with my mother-in-law. One day, I was on a business trip out of town. On my way back to the hotel after a meeting, I spotted my mother-in-law walking hand in hand with a young man in his 20s. What? No way. I was shocked. I'm certain I don't know that guy, so I decided to follow them. They went into a cafe and sat together at a window seat, not facing each other but sitting side by side. Without hesitation, I started recording. Then they leaned closer to each other. Whoa, I can't watch this. After about half an hour, they left the cafe and went into a hotel. The next day, I returned home, waited for the kids to go to bed, and then confronted my husband. Hey, you know what? You wouldn't want to see your parents doing something shameful to you. I was considering whether to tell my husband based on his reaction. If he didn't want to know, I planned to delete the videos and pictures I had taken. I don't really care. You're okay with seeing something shameful involving your own parents? Then I'll take note of that. I understand. Is there something wrong with your parents? But it was your parents. Oh my God, was it my mom? Yeah, I think so. What did she do? Nothing to me. I explained everything that happened yesterday to my husband. Seriously. I have videos and pictures. Let me see. I handed him my phone. Oh my God, that's awful. I can't believe I'm seeing my mom doing that. What does she think she's doing? He didn't seem shocked at all. Aren't you shocked? No, not at all. I mean, it's not the first time this has happened. What? When did it happen before? She used to cheat on Dad because of her frequent travel. She claimed that, but my brother was still in middle school. Dad forgave her, and they worked on their relationship. Oh, I see. Well, I guess this time they won't be able to rebuild it. I had an agency investigate. Can I use our money for it? Of course, it's worth it. Thank you. I'll keep you updated. It took a month to find an agency and get the results. My husband was shocked when he saw the report. Let's show the report to Mom. What? Is that necessary? Why not just give it to Dad and let him decide? That won't make us feel better, Molly. Mom wronged you, didn't she? Let's make sure she faces consequences. That's the only way I'll feel better. I should do something for my dear wife, shouldn't I? Oh, Kevin. To be honest, I wanted to see my mother-in-law lose her composure in front of me. I wanted to make her face the consequences of everything she's done to me. Well done, Kevin. I'll talk to my dad about this before we bring it up. I don't want to blindside him with the truth. Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. So we left our son at my parents' house for the weekend and went to my husband's parents' place. When we arrived, my mother-in-law criticized me as usual, but I wasn't bothered because I knew today would mark the end of her actions against me. We planned to confront her with the evidence during dinner, but my mother-in-law unexpectedly launched an attack right from the start. My husband, my father-in-law, and I were all a bit stunned. Let's begin dinner, my mother-in-law said, smiling. But all three of us, including me, were at a loss for words. World's tiniest meal. She doesn't like my cooking, so she won't eat. I just finished making dinner for everyone in the family except the wives. Okay, fine. I feel relieved. I look at my husband and father-in-law. They both agree with me. All right, it's time to bring it out. It's okay. I'll eat what I made. Wait a minute. I rummaged through my bag. Here it is, Mom. I found this. In my hand is an envelope. Oh, I can't eat this. Oh yes, this was a gift for Mom. I completely forgot. I handed the envelope to my mother-in-law. Oh, you can be clever sometimes. Despite the sarcastic comment, my mother-in-law accepted it happily. And as soon as she saw what was inside the envelope, her hands stopped, and then her whole body started shaking. What's wrong? It's nothing. Are you sure? What did she give you? Just something ordinary. Come on, let's have a look. My mother-in-law tried to use her chopsticks to pick up rice, but she was shaking so much that the rice spilled out of the bowl. Mom mentioned. My husband took the envelope from my mother-in-law. Give it back to me. She looked desperate. My husband took out the contents of the envelope. What's this? It looks like an older woman arranging a date with a younger man. You should check the other side and the back too. That's interesting. On the back, there were photos of my mother-in-law with several young men. Initially, I thought she was having an affair with just one of them, but the agency found out she had relationships with multiple young men. You never learned, you? I can't believe my hard work ended up like this. I think you know what comes next. I'm filing for divorce. Wait a minute. This isn't cheating. It's just for fun. I won't let you waste our money on something like this. It's disgraceful. And these guys are even younger than us. Oh my God. By the way, everyone knows about this now, including Dan and Jason. We're cutting you off. I'm cutting you off too. Don't worry, just accept it. I know you can't afford to pay me alimony. In return, promise to stay away from us. Wait a minute. This wasn't just a casual date. I was just exploring different experiences, right, Molly? You've gone out to eat with other men before. No, that's not true at all. I don't spend money on men who aren't my family. It's a waste. I would have spent it on Kevin or Little John. Don't do this to me. You're also a woman, don't you? Yeah, I am, but what's your point? I'm saying it's not enough to just be a wife or a mother, is it? That's awful. Then why don't you stay single? You. I bet you'll cheat again someday. Don't insult Molly. She's nothing like you, and we all know it. Well, this is a good opportunity for me to tell you something. I've been planning to divorce you when I retire. It seems like the right time. Huh. I forgave you when I found out about your affair a long time ago. You didn't learn from it and kept doing the same thing. I knew it. Actually, on the days you were out, dinner would be frozen food. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? It's all your fault. When you weren't with me, that's what you did. You blame everyone else. It's a miracle our sons turned out to be good people with a mother like you. Yeah, that's because the three of us saw you as a negative example. I think you're the reason Dan and Jason are still single. If you have a spouse like this, your life is seriously messed up. Hey, oh sorry, my mistake. That person used to be my spouse. This is a good beginning. Now get out of my house. You're not getting any of my retirement savings. Wait a minute. I'm entitled to half of it. And because of alimony, I can claim it from 3 years ago when you were cheating on me. It's going to be a lot of money. My mother-in-law paused, thought about it, and then turned and. Where is she going? She must have gone back to her parents' house. After that, my mother-in-law never returned, and they divorced. She was left with nothing. She moved back in with her parents, but now that the money's gone, she seemed disconnected from the younger crowd and stayed home for a while. My husband's grandparents, instead of taking her back in, had her start working full-time. Now she works at a supermarket near her parents' place. My father-in-law is a very forgiving man. My mother-in-law made a big mistake betraying him. With her gone, our family is finally in harmony. My brothers-in-law, Dan and Jason, who rarely visited before, are now around often. Lately, they've been talking about getting married. I'm happy for them. Everyone is smiling. I'm pregnant with my second child now, and will continue putting my family first. Dealing with a mother-in-law like that was tough. It's sad how people who cheat often lose their way. I hope my father-in-law can enjoy his later years in peace now. Thank you for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel if you enjoyed it. See you in the next video.
I'll let my parents live in this house. You can't even cook, so leave lol, Mark said to me with a grin, like he was proud of himself. I was so shocked I couldn't even respond. There is no way I would let my parents live in my house and then try to move in with my in-laws without my permission and try to kick me, the owner of the house, out. I've been bothered by Mark's bossy attitude for a while, but now it's really upsetting. I can't keep living with Mark if he keeps acting like this. I've decided that Mark needs to face consequences. My name is Sarah, and I'm a housewife in my 40s. I live with my husband, Mark. Mark is a house husband. He doesn't work but takes care of the housework because I have a job. I work to earn the money we need. All of this is to have a stable life with Mark, but it feels like my efforts are pointless. Mark has a very controlling personality. It's not that I think there's anything wrong with being a stay-at-home husband or that men should always work, but even though he's not working, he acts like he's the one in charge and is protecting the house. Out of the blue, Mark would say something like, "I'm so tired today, I want some ice cream, go buy it for me," while lounging in the living room at 11 p.m. The convenience store isn't far, but after a hard day at work, I was exhausted and annoyed by his demanding attitude. "Why don't you go get it yourself? It's just a short walk to the store," I replied, sounding harsher than I intended. That's how much Mark's behavior irritated me. When I refused, Mark chuckled and said, "You think that's how you should behave? You never know what will happen if you upset your husband. He always acts like he's the man of the house and deserves respect because of it." Honestly, I'm fed up with Mark acting superior and expecting respect just because he's the husband. Every time he behaves this way, I feel more and more frustrated and unwilling to deal with him. At that moment, I realized that if I kept dealing with Mark on top of my already stressful job, my stress would become unbearable. So I said, "I'm really tired. I'm sorry, I'm going to rest in my room." But Mark didn't like my response and stopped me, saying, "Wait, what's with that attitude towards your husband? I could kick you out right now if I wanted to. Do you think it's alright to upset your spouse like that?" He looked angry. Who does he think he's kidding, acting like the boss when he doesn't even work? He can upset me whenever he wants, but heaven forbid I upset him. It's just like a child's tantrum. "I'm sorry, but I'm really exhausted. Please understand," I said with a forced smile, not wanting to talk anymore. Mark sighed deeply and muttered, "You're such a disappointment as a wife." At this point, I didn't have the energy to argue, so I just said, "I'm sorry," again and went to my room. Day by day, I was worn down by Mark's overbearing behavior, but I didn't have the energy to confront him about it. That's how exhausted I was. Then one day, I caught a bad cold. The doctor said it was a stress-induced fever, and the first thing that came to my mind was Mark. I was so sick that I couldn't move, so I took a day off from work and could only lie down in bed. When I told Mark about my condition, he snapped, "A cold? That's just an excuse. Go to work, you're useless." His words seemed to make my fever spike even higher. He added, "I won't be taking care of you. This is your mess, deal with it." So I was left alone in my room, moaning from the fever. There were no ice packs or anything to help. I was too weak to prepare anything for myself, and I didn't want to face Mark again for fear of more verbal abuse. My temperature reached 103 degrees Fahrenheit. The fever was so high that my body was drenched in sweat. I couldn't even get up to change my clothes, even when they were soaked. I thought, how much easier would it be if I could just pass away with these thoughts? I endured a painful night alone. Maybe it was the fever, but I couldn't sleep at all. Even when the sun set and it was time to see the night sky, feelings of loneliness and doubt overwhelmed me, and it was unbearable. I really wanted Mark to help, not necessarily to bring down my fever, but just to get me an ice pack, bring a cold compress, and say, "Are you okay?" But that was just a fantasy. The words I actually received tore at my heart, leading to new anxieties that tormented me. Why must I be the only one to feel this way? What did I do wrong? Why can't things go well with Mark? Once these thoughts started, I couldn't stop the tears. It was just so painful. After about 3 days of rest, my fever finally subsided and I was able to return to work. My colleagues and bosses were concerned, asking, "Are you sure you're all right?" But my health was improving, and more than anything, I had to support the household. When I mentioned that I couldn't afford to take more time off, they seemed even more worried. Their kindness, which was so much more than the attitude I received from Mark, brought tears to my eyes. I guess my emotional breaking point was close. A voice inside me was screaming that I couldn't deal with Mark any longer. I was ignoring that, pushing myself too hard. This way of life wouldn't last forever. Someday I'd reach my limit and wouldn't be able to get back up. Deep down I knew that, but I didn't have the presence of mind to deal with the situation before reaching my limit. By this time my affection for Mark had already faded, but I didn't have the energy to start planning to live separately. How could I clear these feelings? With these worries I worked hard every day, came home exhausted, and dealt with Mark's whims. This was my daily life. One day while I was relaxing in my room, Mark called out, "I have something important to discuss. Come here." It had been a long time since we had a serious talk. Usually, Mark wouldn't inform me about various things and would make significant decisions on his own, so with a sinking feeling, I wondered what this was about. As I sat down for the discussion, Mark, with an excitement I'd never seen before, said, "I'll let my parents live in this house. You can't even cook, so leave." Oh. The first word that slipped out was, "What?" "You need to leave because you're living with my in-laws," he continued. I couldn't accept the reality of Mark's utterly selfish remarks, but he continued pushing forward with the conversation. He wanted to change the ownership of the house so it belonged to him and his parents. He planned to divorce me and start a new family, stating that his decision was final, and my opinions wouldn't change it. I felt overwhelmed by decisions made without any regard for my feelings. My parents were thrilled when I suggested they move in with us. They've missed me, and I need to take care of them as the head of the household. Mark, full of himself with his man-of-the-house mentality, only thought about his own needs. I knew I couldn't go on with Mark any longer. My heart told me it was impossible. Ignoring my feelings, Mark chuckled, "You love me so much, don't you? I know this is shocking coming from a husband you love so dearly, but I'm sorry. I just want to take care of my family. Please understand," Mark said in a tone that felt like a rebuke. But I wanted to respond, "That's not true at all." I had no affection left for Mark. What remained was disbelief at his selfish actions and regret for not ending things sooner. Why hadn't I left him earlier? If I had, Mark wouldn't have taken advantage of me so much or been so selfish and arrogant. I even despised my past self for being too weak to let him go. Seeing my distress, Mark seemed to misunderstand, thinking I still loved him and didn't want a divorce. But that couldn't be further from the truth. My feelings for Mark had faded long ago. All that was left was disgust for a man who thought I still cared despite everything. To make myself clear, I spoke up, "Fine then, I'll leave." At those words, Mark exclaimed, "What?" Clearly, he hadn't expected me to agree to a divorce and leave so readily. He needed to realize that the old me, who used to bail him out, was gone for good. From now on, whatever happens to Mark, I won't be there to help him because we won't be a couple anymore. Seeing my determination, Mark looked shocked and frozen in place. I seized the moment to head to my room and pack the essentials. I couldn't take larger items today, so I'd have to arrange for movers later. As I prepared to leave, Mark hurried over and asked, "Are you sure about this? If we divorce, we'll be strangers." I smiled and replied, "I've already fallen out of love with you. Letting go feels like a weight lifted off my shoulders." Hearing this, Mark stood there looking lost. I nodded, said, "Thanks for everything," and walked out of the house. Mark had a worried look on his face. After I returned to my parents' place and explained everything, they were furious with Mark's behavior at first, but calmed down once they knew I had a plan. I started recovering at my parents' home while sorting out various matters, starting with the divorce. After sending the divorce papers, I received a message from Mark. "Are you sure about this? I don't know if it's really a good thing, but I don't have any feelings for you anymore. If we've gone this far and he says there's no divorce, that would be a problem. I feel so much better now that you're gone, so fill out the divorce papers quickly." When I replied, there was no response. A few days later, I received completed divorce papers from Mark, with his sections already filled out. I promptly completed my parts and submitted them to the county office on the same day. Now Mark and I are officially divorced. I no longer have to support the household as Mark's wife. During the divorce, we divided our assets. Mark got the house as he had originally insisted on it, so I transferred ownership to him and decided to move on. The house was never really comfortable for me anyway. It had been more of a burden. Instead, I decided to seek alimony from Mark. His parents covered it since he wasn't working, but now he's actively job hunting, likely planning to repay them once he finds a decent job. However, reality doesn't always follow plans. A month passed after the divorce was finalized, and I moved out of my parents' home into a new place, enjoying a peaceful life. Then I received a call from Mark. Honestly, I found it annoying. I immediately guessed why he was calling, but ignoring him might lead to more complications. So, knowing I'd have to talk to him sooner or later, I decided to address it now for the sake of my own future. "Hello, what do you want after all this time?" I was completely fed up with dealing with Mark. I wanted him to get to the point quickly. Reluctantly, I answered the phone, and he pleaded, "Please help me." His desperate tone made me chuckle. I knew Mark was in a tough spot, but I hadn't expected it to be this bad. "Well, what's going on? You need to tell me the whole story," I replied, half amused. I had a feeling about why Mark was in trouble, but I wanted him to explain it himself. When I pressed him, Mark started explaining hesitantly, stumbling over his words. He had taken over the house after our divorce and managed fine for a month. But now he had a rent payment due. Being unemployed, he couldn't cover it himself, so he asked my former parents-in-law, who were on a pension, to help out. However, the bill was much higher than they expected, around $1,800. There was no way they could afford that on their fixed income. My former in-laws were furious, insisting, "This isn't what we agreed to." They laid the blame squarely on Mark. Lost and uncertain, Mark called me in tears, asking for help. "I didn't realize the rent would be so high. The place is a mess now. What are you going to do about it?" Frustrated, Mark was now blaming me. It was true I hadn't mentioned the rent specifics earlier, but it was Mark's own folly to take over the house without knowing its monthly costs. He had treated me like an outsider and pushed me away, and now he was facing the consequences of his actions. Despite this, he couldn't accept responsibility and instead reached out to me for help. I couldn't help but sigh at his audacity. Ignoring my feelings, Mark continued urgently, "Please, I need your help. We can't keep going like this. I need you." His desperation was clear in his voice. They must be feeling incredibly trapped right now. The rent due date had likely passed, meaning they might already be behind. The landlord of that house was known for their short temper and strict policy on rent payments. I remembered being warned repeatedly when I rented the house, never be late with the rent. If they missed a payment, they were in for serious trouble with the owner. Mark had met the landlord a couple of times and knew how intimidating they could be. He must have been desperate when he called me for help. "Please just cover the rent for 1 month. I don't have anyone else to turn to. You still care about me, right? If someone you care about is in trouble, you should help them out," Mark pleaded, his tone still self-centered. "My feelings for you have long since faded." I wanted to say those words, but I held back and replied coldly, "I'm sorry, but I don't have any obligation to help you. You were the one who cut me off. Now you expect me to assist you when it's convenient for you? That's not fair." Mark defended himself. "Please don't be so cold. I really can't handle this alone. Whether you still love me or not doesn't matter now. We were married once, right? Can't you help me out just this once?" "No, you were the one who left me. Even before that, my feelings for you had already cooled. It's been a long time since I stopped loving you." When I heard Mark's dejected voice on the other end of the phone saying, "I can't believe it," it struck a chord deep within me. For so long, I endured everything. Even when Mark was selfish, took me for granted or mistreated me when I was sick, I stayed by his side, hoping to salvage our marriage. I worked tirelessly for the life we had, but this was the outcome. Why hadn't I left sooner when my love for him faded? Why didn't I distance myself earlier? These regrets flooded in, mingling with the anger I felt towards him. Mark never truly faced me. He never showed real concern, never protected me, and never embraced the idea of navigating life together as a team. All this time, he treated me like a maid, a mere money-making machine. Each time he acted this way, he seemed oblivious to my suffering. Yet now, despite all this being a result of his actions, he came pleading for help as if he were the victim. His self-centered attitude was repelling. "Please help me, I'm begging you. What about getting married again? Let's start over properly this time. I promise I'll never push you away again," Mark proposed, desperately. I couldn't help but chuckle bitterly at Mark's desperate suggestion. "Remarry you? Are you kidding me? All of this is the result of your own actions. I've been trying to work things out in my own way for a long, long time. I kept hoping you would face reality. And now you want me to start over with you, pretending none of that ever happened? Do you expect me to go back to those miserable days? That's never going to happen. I refuse to return to that life, no matter what." I became so emotional that tears started flowing. I couldn't tell if they were from anger or sadness. Mark remained silent in response to my words. Unable to continue the conversation any longer, I simply said, "Goodbye," and hung up. Mark didn't call back, and wanting to avoid hearing his voice ever again, I blocked his number. Later, I heard from mutual friends that Mark and his family were evicted from their home. Mark attempted to persuade my former in-laws to cover his rent, but they were furious, refusing his request and upsetting the landlord in the process. Left with no choice, they had to leave. Mark hasn't had much success finding a full-time job and is now working part-time to get by. Because they had to sell their house, my former in-laws are now squeezed into a rundown apartment, all three of them together. Meanwhile, I've been deeply focused on my work, and my boss has even discussed a promotion with me. There's a possibility I might become the first female manager in our company, and I've been receiving admiration from both colleagues and juniors. Sometimes friends inquire, "Aren't you thinking about getting married?" Honestly, after my past experiences, I have a rather negative view of marriage. The idea of dating or marrying again doesn't appeal to me right now. But life is long and there's no rush. Many people in this generation live their entire lives happily unmarried. What matters most to me is living a life without regrets and staying true to myself. With that in mind, I want to continue navigating life at my own pace.